This is the Paul Finebaum Show, supplemented by Aflac.
I've heard some reaction and overreaction. Let's talk to somebody who covered a game Saturday, maybe has a different perspective. He is Andy Staples from The Athletic, and he was on the Plains this weekend. And Andy, looks like you made it back safe and sound. Great to have you on, and take us through the day down there, the real live college football game.
Yeah, it was weird, Paul. I'm not used to being in an SEC town where there's no traffic. You saw the cops stationed at the interstate exits off of 85 to direct traffic that there was no traffic. And the only signs of life I saw in the morning, there were lines wrapped around the drive-thrus at Dunkin' Donuts and Starbucks, but that was about it. It didn't look like there was an SEC football game going on that day. And I mean, I live in an SEC town, so I know usually when there's a conference game coming, you can tell by Friday afternoon that the town is just bigger. And this was strange. You just drove right on, and the students at Auburn were really fired up. This was the student-only game, the Kentucky game. So they were fired up. They were very loud. I mean, for the size of the crowd they had, they made some noise. And then once the football started, though, it just sort of felt normal. We sort of locked right in. I think a lot of that had to do with the fact that Auburn and Kentucky came in really prepared. I didn't see a lot of the sloppiness from those two teams that I saw in a lot of the other games I've watched. And they just, they weren't having trouble lining up. They weren't false starting. They're just playing exactly the way you'd expect them to play on September 26th. So that was a lot of fun.
Let's start with Kentucky because, they looked pretty good in the first half, and then it seemed like everything that could go wrong did.
Yeah, they should have gotten a touchdown there right before the half. I don't know why that official decided to say his forward momentum had been stopped when you always give the person a chance to make a second effort and get in the end zone. So they should have gotten that touchdown, but that probably wouldn't have helped them because of the big fumble in the third quarter by Terry Wilson. And Terry Wilson and Mark Stoops both said it. It's really hard to simulate that stuff in practice. Terry hadn't been hit in a year. He hadn't played since the Eastern Michigan game last year. So I think that's one of those things that they can get cleaned up. But overall, I thought they played a really good game. And Mark Stoops made a really good point after the game. He said, in a lot of those games, they can do 95% of the stuff right, but if they 5% wrong in critical areas, they're going to lose. And when they're playing an Auburn or an Alabama or a Florida or a Georgia, those are the teams that those 5% really matter. But the thing is, Kentucky's talented enough, especially on both lines of scrimmage, to go toe-to-toe with teams like that. So if they can clean it up, they can have a really good season. They can surprise some people. But this one, is it even a surprise? I think Mark Stoops has done a really good job there, and we know how good they are on the offensive line. I think they're pretty good on the D-line, too.
Andy, 1,000 questions I could ask you, but everybody's still talking about what happened in Baton Rouge, and it's easy to overreact, especially when you consider who wasn't in the game that could have been. But what's your takeaway?
I've been saying all summer, Mike Leach has never had a team this talented. Nobody coached at Texas Tech. No team he coached at Washington State was that talented. There were good players like Michael Crabtree, Gardner Minshew, but not a top-to-bottom roster like this. So it reminds me a little bit of when I covered Florida and Urban Meyer got the job, and people said, well, that offense isn't going to work in the SEC. You're not playing against Colorado State. Yeah, but you're not playing with Utah players either. You were playing with Florida players. So Mike Leach is playing with Mississippi State players now. And that's a big upgrade, especially at wide receiver. I think KJ Costello is the perfect guy to bring in at quarterback. He mastered the Stanford offense, which is about as complex of an offense as you're going to find. And then smart guys tend to learn the air raid quickly. Look at Gardner Minshew a couple of years ago. So I thought they had a chance to put up some points. But did I think they were going to beat LSU? Absolutely not. I figured they'd score a bunch of points, but LSU would just out-athlete them at some point. But that didn't happen. And you saw a lot of what LSU lost. You saw a lot of cases where I think a more experienced team probably would have been able to handle that game a little bit better. And I thought offensively LSU kind of clicked a little bit going into the second half. You started to see Miles Brennan get a little more comfortable. Eric Gilbert looks like he's going to be as good as advertised. So it's one of those things where one or two players, you mentioned Derek Stingley was out. Just imagine if Jamar Chase hadn't opted out a few weeks ago. If Jamar Chase is in this game, it's probably even. LSU may still lose, but it's probably a little bit closer. So they lost a lot. You know that. it's going to take a little time for those younger guys to get ready. But I will say this. Somebody posted the Mississippi State roster from the end of last season, or the Mississippi State starting lineup from the end of last season. This is a very different Mississippi State team, too. So I don't know if that's even a legitimate excuse you can make. But it was interesting because Mike Leach has always said, I know this will work in the SEC. I know this offense can work in that league. And I think Saturday was absolute proof of that.
I mean, Mike Leach is the talk of the country, obviously, and we knew we'd have either Mike or Lane Kiffin in this moment somewhere, somehow. But what's this Mississippi State team capable of this year?
Well, if they can go down to Baton Rouge and beat LSU, I think they can compete with just about anybody. I will be curious to see them against Alabama because the one thing that fascinated me about Mike Leach's tenure at Washington State was the fact that when he played Washington, they seemed to always have that offense's number. And, you're thinking Nick Saban and that roster, that would probably be the best analog to Washington in the league. But, look, LSU has really good athletes on defense. I mean, it's not like they weren't recruiting well. And that defense got shredded. Now, you can say, I don't know, they haven't faced it. But the thing is, the air raid's been around long enough, and you can call some people around the country and say, how have you handled this? You should be able to face it a little bit better. Now, I think this is a case of he's got a good quarterback, some really good receivers, and Kylan Hill coming out of the backfield is a weapon. It's interesting because somebody asked Mike Leach after the game about, they only ran for 9 yards. What about using Kylan Hill? And he looked up Kylan Hill's receiving numbers, and they were off the charts. I mean, Kylan Hill may be putting himself in Clyde Edwards-Helaire territory where he's kind of the ultimate weapon. And I think they've got really good players, and that offense has never had this level of talent running it.
Andy, I won't go game by game because there are just way too many, but Georgia has gotten already a lot of conversation here in the first 90 minutes of the show. We know things are going to be a little bit different this week. Daniel's back, but what do you make out of their quarterback situation?
It's really interesting because we don't know exactly how it went down. They've been pretty secretive about how everything went down in the preseason. But I do wonder, was DeJuan Mathis starting because he had kind of earned that job, or was it just JT Daniels was out and Newman had opted out? We won't know about that, but I thought Stetson Bennett came in and did a really good job. I thought he got the ball out on time. It was clear he was running the offense as it was intended to be run. And everything opened up after that. Now, it concerned me in the first half that Georgia couldn't just turn around and hand the ball off and gain a bunch of yards on the ground against Arkansas. I feel like if you're playing against Auburn or Florida or Alabama, you're going to have some serious problems if you can't just do that against Arkansas. But, when Bennett came in, the running game perked up because he was able to throw. They couldn't stack the box like they did before. So I'll be interested to see if Bennett starts this weekend against Auburn and he's had all the first-team reps, he could be pretty good because you think about it, if DeJuan Mathis was getting most of the first-team reps last week and Bennett, who we didn't hear much about for most of the offseason, if he was kind of buried and wasn't getting a lot of reps and all that was on instinct alone, he could be pretty good when he's had a week of practice.
Alabama, Florida, and Georgia, 2, 3, and 4 in the country. That doesn't happen very often. And this week, of course, Georgia. But I want to flip it over to the other side, the underbelly. And A&M heads to Tuscaloosa this weekend, and their fan base is already a little nauseous. Should they be concerned?
Yes, they should be very concerned. I mean, when you're playing Vandy, and look, it looks like Vandy's got a quarterback. I liked him a lot, but you gotta come out stronger than that. And I realize this offseason has not gone the way Texas A&M thought it would. They thought they had Jamon Osmond back, and then he opts out a couple weeks ago. They thought they'd have a really good 2 tight end offense with Weidermeyer and Baylor Cupp. Baylor Cupp gets hurt and isn't able to play. So you end up playing a lot of young guys, but they are going to have to be better. Kellen Mond's going to have a great game. Isaiah Spiller, who I thought ran pretty well on Saturday night, is going to have to really step it up. And that line's going to have to block better, which we knew. The offensive line at Texas A&M was kind of one of the question marks going in, even though they were experienced and those guys had played a lot. But could they play well against the Alabamas and the LSUs and the Auburns? And we're going to find out. But what I saw Saturday does not give me a lot of confidence with them heading into Tuscaloosa, where, I mean, Alabama seems like just an almost perfectly constructed team right now. I had some people get mad at me last week because I said something to the tune of, Alabama brings everybody back. And they said, well, what about Tua? What about Jerry Jeudy and Henry Ruggs? And I'm like, well, they lost Tua during the season last year. And then, yeah, they lost Jeudy and Ruggs, but they still have Devontae Smith and Jalen Waddle, who probably the best receiver duo in the country. And then that offensive line, and then they have the linebackers back who didn't play last year. I mean, it is a loaded team. I'm trying to think of the last time an Alabama team felt this complete because, they won that national title in 2017, but they had all those injury issues at linebacker. I think you got to go back a ways before you get to one that felt this whole.
Yeah, and on the other side of this, the Aggies play at Alabama this week, at Florida, and then Mississippi State. Or I can't remember which one. The Florida game may be at home, but at Alabama, Florida at home, and then at Mississippi State. I mean, this is a dangerous beginning for Jimbo Fisher, who, you and I hear this from I realize you're in the national media, but from national media that don't cover the SEC very closely. I mean, he is on everyone's list to jump all over.
Well, it's interesting because if you go talk to Texas A&M people, they'll tell you this was the season they had circled because there's no Clemson in the out-of-conference schedule. There's no Georgia in the crossover, and I'm talking about the original schedule for this season, where they basically traded Clemson and Georgia for Colorado and Vanderbilt. And you looked at that schedule and thought, oh my gosh, this team could be 9-0, could be 9-1 to start. I mean, they're going to have a great year. Now you have this 10-game SEC-only schedule. You've had some opt-outs. We got to figure out what constitutes success in a year like this anyway. I think it's 7 wins or more against an all-SEC schedule. And I don't know that they're going to hit that. If they play like they did Saturday, they won't. And at that point, how do the A&M people feel about Jimbo? Because they were perfectly happy to be patient with him because they felt like this year was really set up. A fourth-year starting quarterback, a fairly easy schedule. But here's the thing. You're in the SEC West. So whether your non-conference is easy or not shouldn't matter. Your division schedule is always going to be hard. If you plan to compete in the SEC West, you need to be good enough to compete for the national title. That's just the facts. That's just the reality of the situation. And I'm not sure they're there right now. And so we'll see how the A&M people feel. Now, the thing is, I don't think they have a choice but to be patient with him because he's still guaranteed a ton more money. But do they start to get off the boat if it looks really bad on Saturday?
And one last thing, we're short on time, and I'm not blaming Jimbo for what's happening right now at Florida State, but the verdict on him in the way he left that program is not going to be good based on the destruction of the program since.
Yeah, and look, I've written a couple things about what was left behind and what Willie Taggart had to work with when he got there. But at this point with Florida State, I don't know that you can pin this on Jimbo anymore. I think you got to pin it on a lot of factors. One, the hiring of Willie Taggart, to the firing of Willie Taggart, because I think it's pretty hard for Mike Norvell to get this locker room, wrap his arms around it, because these guys, they've been through the ringer. They got a lot of them got recruited by Jimbo. He leaves. Then they get Willie Taggart. Some of them like him, some of them don't. But then he gets fired, and it's just like there's nothing. None of the rah-rah stuff's going to work on that team anymore. So you just got to be real with them and say, look, I'm sorry you've had not the college experience you wanted, but we're just going to have to start over from scratch and do the best we can here. And it sounded, listening to Mike Norvell today, that's kind of what they're doing when they start with Jacksonville State, hoping to have the palate cleanser before they get back into the ACC schedule.
Great stuff. Andy, we could have asked you 1,000 more questions, and we will in the future. Thanks for coming on, Andy. Andy Staples.
The Paul Finebaum Show is
And already everybody is bent out of shape. Already fans are jumping off buildings and wondering about coordinators. So why don't we calm down And who better to calm down than Tony Barnhart? Tony, good afternoon. And I wondered if this season would feel normal. It feels pretty normal.
Oh, Paul, it feels great. I mean, you talking about fans calling out other fans, calling out the officials, calling out their coaches, calling out. Commissioner Sankey said everybody's been so nice to him leading up to this. And he says, he told me after we have one bad call, they're not going to be nice anymore. Football season is back, and not a moment too soon.
I agree with you. It had gone on. I mean, listen, we were going through a global pandemic. We'd never seen anything like this before. But I miss the overreaction that we are getting today already. Let's start with Georgia, because we've heard a lot of Georgia fans. We heard Kirby a minute ago. It looked really bad at times. I mean, if you think about it a couple of days later, what did you see? And there is no time to worry because Auburn's coming to town.
Well, a couple of things were going on. Number one, quarterback Juwan Mathis. Yeah, he's gone through an incredible journey. Had brain surgery last year. He looked very uncomfortable, unsure of himself, but that's to be expected. The big issue, Paul, was that Barry Odom, the new defensive coordinator, had a very good game plan. Just slow down the Georgia running game, and it took time for Georgia to sort of wear Arkansas out, and they eventually did that. But as another caller said, they've got some growing up to do on the offensive line, and that is job one. There's no question.
In terms of who the quarterback is going to be, I realize we don't know enough about JT Daniels yet, other than he can play. But what do you hear?
Well, obviously, Coach Smart said that the JT Daniels would be cleared to play, but he's not telling anybody if he's going to play or not. Is he going to get through the week and do the things they need to do? I would assume that Stetson Bennett would start the game, given the way he played. He sort of calmed everybody down. Juwan Mathis deserves another chance. There were some things on the field that weren't his fault. But I would expect Stetson Bennett to start the game, all things considered.
Tony, if I had told you, 2 months ago, that Stetson Bennett would start the Auburn game, I want to get your reaction.
Oh, I said, Paul, you got to be kidding me. Then everybody else got hurt. Listen, Stetson Bennett is a great story. He walks on at Georgia, is great with the scout team. He ends up leaving because he wanted to play. He just wanted to play. He went to a junior college in Mississippi. Then they brought him back because they needed some help. And for him to come off the bench to lead Georgia, to get Georgia through that game, it's just an incredible story. And there's a couple of stories. Jeff Sintel of the AJC on DogNation.com did a really good one. And if you want to know more about Stetson Bennett, that would be a really good story to read.
Okay, the overreacting is everywhere, but I'm only guessing. I haven't done this for more than a couple of years. I'm guessing LSU is going to win the day, but they lost the opener. And, Tony, we don't see this very often.
No, we don't, and we don't see somebody throw for 623 yards against the defending national champions. I would venture to say that has not happened. But, listen, that game, unless you're an LSU fan, that game was so much fun to watch. And I'm sitting there watching it, and Mike Leach seems to be going, well, as long as Bo Pelini is going to cover my guys' man coverage, guess what we're going to do? Until he changes, I'm not going to change. And 623 yards later, they've beaten LSU.
Indeed. And looking ahead, I realize LSU's schedule is pretty self-evident, but how do you recalibrate this program? Everyone thought they would at least contend. What about now?
You know what? I think they'll figure it out. Now, the question is, they'll be okay against Vanderbilt, and I think they'll be okay against Missouri at home. Feel pretty good about that. But then they got to go to the Swamp. That will be a very, very telling game. Look, Paul, LSU's got players. They've always had players. What they didn't have was a quarterback who was comfortable in his own shoes and a clear idea of what they wanted to do. LSU looked like a bunch of guys who were like good players, but they had no idea who they wanted to be or what they wanted to be. I think they'll get that figured out. But we knew LSU was going to take a step back, and they're going to take a step back. How big a step back is what we don't know.
Well, you mentioned Florida, and not a surprise what they did, what they looked like offensively. There are some concerns on the defensive side, but overall, this looks like a legitimate contender, doesn't it?
It does. I thought Florida looked really good. Yeah, they gave up a bunch of yards, but the fact of the matter is, Kyle Trask looked like he was totally in command of what and he did last year. And Kyle Pitts, he's a matchup nightmare. I don't know what you do with that guy. And so Florida looks right now. You'd have to put Florida ahead of Georgia in the SEC East, but it's early. And Paul, you talked about not overreacting. If there was ever a year, first couple of weeks, it's good. It's this one.
Yeah, no, I mean the Gators. We'll see everybody quickly. A&M, South Carolina, and then obviously LSU. There's so many places to go. Let me go to South Carolina for a second. That was the final game of the day, and it was fairly typical of this series. But in the end, it seemed like Will Muschamp can't do anything right. He gets his team back in the game, and it all falls apart.
Two takeaways there is that. They put themselves in a position to win the game. Then you have a special teams mess up, and you just can't have that, and you don't get a chance to win the football game. But I'll say this: what impressed me about that game, Paul, was that 2 years ago, Tennessee is absolutely going to lose that football game on the road, only up by 4. They're not going to win, but Tennessee is slowly but surely learning how to win games. And if I'm a Tennessee fan, I'm encouraged by that game the other night.
Let's look at I haven't heard a lot of panic out of you yet, Tony. But that's you. I mean, you didn't get to this point in life by overreacting and panicking to everything you hear. But if you are concerned, and I mean seriously concerned about a school or two schools that you saw Saturday, who would it be?
Well, I'm concerned about what's going to happen at South Carolina because they got to go to Gainesville this week. And I will say this: if I'm a South Carolina fan, I'm encouraged by what the offense looked like. The play calling under Mike Bobo is so much better than it has been. But that's a team I'm concerned about. I'm also concerned about Texas A&M. Now, give Vanderbilt credit. Ted Roof has obviously done a very good job with that Vanderbilt defense, but Texas A&M I thought would particularly at home would play a little bit better than they did against Vanderbilt. But we'll see. Got to go to T-Town on Saturday. That will be a very important game for them.
Tony, it is always a pleasure. A&M has Alabama and Florida back-to-back. And then at Mississippi State. I mean, I didn't notice that Mississippi State game until Saturday afternoon. So great to have you on, and I hope you're well, and we will talk to you very, very soon.
All right. Thanks, Paul.
One of my favorites. Tony Barnhart joining us, calming us down a little bit, at least for a couple of minutes. More of your phone calls at 855-242-7285, and we are coming right back.
The biggest thing is really just constant emphasis, and it starts in the weight room on Sunday. And everybody, the other teams have talked about it too. The 24-hour rule, let it go after 24 hours, and we officially, try to seal it up after our Sunday practice, and then constantly reinforce it, and then. Also, try to get some of your team leaders to reinforce it with the rest of the group, but and just focus on the next task at hand, which is watching film for Arkansas and preparing our game plan for this week. I thought they were a pretty tenacious group. I thought that they moved around well. I thought they were aggressive. And they took, they just flat out took a half away from Georgia, and I thought that was quite impressive. And then I felt like they played really hard. I think that they've got some speed out there. And then I think that, schematically that's, of course, worked in the past in this conference. And so I think it'll be a good challenge. I don't think, you always are working on something. You always keep progressing. We tell these guys, make the corrections we give you. We say, give me something else to coach, because if you're coaching, if they don't make the correction, you're coaching the same thing. And so we say, give us something else to coach. And so there is that about it. No matter what happens, we'll continue to say, give us something else to coach, and we'll keep looking for ways to refine it. I think, as far as knowing the plays, there's a combination: knowing the plays, knowing the scheme, and then the other is becoming familiar with your personnel, which we're still working on that. We're still battling that, becoming familiar enough with your personnel, who's going to be where, when, and what's the timing of all that. And that was tough for us because we had to kind of search for who could do what, and because it was kind of being revealed to us as we went because we weren't here.
And a little bit of a belated hello. I've been experiencing some storms and outages and things like that happen when you're trying to do a live show. We do apologize. We'll try to act like everything's great, though. But let's get to some headlines here. Better late than ever. And they're starting out in College Station, Texas, where Kellen Mond gets a vote of confidence from Jimbo Fisher heading into Alabama. And that's a smart thing to do if you're the head football coach. You're heading into the toughest place in the league to play, so why not? Kellen Mond has not been great against great opposition. He's been good overall, but against ranked teams, he's 3-8. QBR is okay. Turnovers okay, not great, but he'll need better than great Saturday at Bryant-Denny Stadium. Meanwhile, at LSU, things are a little better. Derek Stingley is apparently on his way back. Remember, he was gone from the first game against Mississippi State, and that was a huge, monumental loss. His father, pretty well known in his own right, had this to say.
Derek had a reaction to something that caused him to have to go to the hospital. And when we got there, they were just running some tests on him, make sure that they were ruling out everything. And before we knew it, he was fine. He was actually ready to go right before the game started. They started doing the discharge papers to get him out of the hospital. It's one of those moments where, me personally, I would hate to relive or go through it again. But he's good. He's good. He's healthy. He's ready to go.
Glad to hear it. Meanwhile, everything has been great with the NFL until today. The Titans and the Vikings have closed facilities after Titan players, a number of them, have tested positive for COVID. We are watching this story very closely. It is literally the first time the NFL has had any significant issues since it came back to camp in late July. Speaking of COVID issues, Mike Norvell missed Saturday's game. He's coming back. Probably a good thing he missed it if he was sick, because his team, the Seminoles, were waylaid by Miami. And meanwhile, Notre Dame missed a game last week against Wake Forest, and things are slowly, and I mean slowly, returning to normal. They still have a number of positive tests. We will keep you posted on the Irish. Again, we are going to try to get, I don't know why I'm coughing. I'm just thinking about all the things that have been going on behind the scenes. Well, anyway, great to have you back on the program. We thought those interviews were so great from earlier in the week that we would replay them again. We are still not 100% sure everything is going to work, so just bear with us here as this is now turning into a reality show of the Finebaum Show. Let's see what's going on out there in radio call-in land and see if we can actually hear the callers. We couldn't earlier. Mark, are you there? This is what we were afraid of. I'll give Mark one more shot. Mark, I guess you cannot hear me, or I cannot hear you. So we have not put every one of those chords together perfectly. So I'll tell you what we'll do. That is important. When you do a call-in show, it's critically important to be able to hear the call. Okay, so why don't we do this? Let's take a break, and we will keep trying to put all the right wires in the right holes, and have a normal show for you. If there aren't any calls, I'll just talk to myself for 4 hours. How about that? We'll be right back. And we welcome you back, and really glad that you are still with us. We'll figure some things out in a minute, but before we get back to the calls, let's check in on some of the moments of today. A number of the coaches had press conferences, including Jeremy Pruitt and Dan Mullen.
After watching the ball game, I think after what I said after the game, pretty spot on. When you look at us in all three phases, just starting with a kicking game, I thought there was times in the game that we won the vertical field position, especially on our punt team and punt return and kickoff coverage. But we had a bad snap on punt. And we missed a field goal that probably, if we'd kicked it straight, should have been blocked. So things that we can't have happen. We're fortunate that we didn't get one blocked in the game. And something that we've really got to address and improve on moving forward. Offensively, I felt like we were a little bit hot and cold. We're very poor on third down. Something that's got to be addressed. We've got to be able to finish blockers. Got to understand the down and distances as a running back. A couple of times I felt like we ran sideways at running back instead of hitting the ball up in there and taking what we got. Possibly, being in third and short. Instead, it's 3rd and 2 or 3, which is a big difference when it comes to third down or the possibility of making it 4-down territory. But we did create explosive plays on offense. There's times that we move the ball at will, but we've got to create some consistency there. The number one thing, we didn't turn the football over offensively, which in my opinion is why we won the football game. Defensively, again, kind of the same thing. There's a couple of times we felt like we should have got off the field on third down. Several times, we were a little bit out of place, and we've got to be able to make the other team beat us, and something that we've got to improve on this week. If you look at Missouri, just watching the game they played against Alabama, they won the second half. I know the game didn't start off the way they wanted to, but if you watch how they played extremely hard. They were aggressive. They created problems in all three phases. So it'll be a tremendous challenge for us as we move forward.
I think there's a lot of teachable moments. I think we'll be a lot better defensively come Saturday. I think there's a lot you can see in what happened in that game and why we had some of our breakdowns. One, I don't want to take anything away from Ole Miss. I think, obviously when we were down some players in game one, playing an extremely up-tempo offense, and they do a really good job of getting their playmakers the ball. They got a couple guys that can do stuff with it, and they do a good job of scheming those guys to make sure they get the ball. But I expect a much better defense. I think normally, early in the season, everyone's like, okay, the defenses are great and the offenses are going to take a little time to catch up. I think when you eliminate spring ball, okay, when you eliminate the amount of tackling that you've done in this time, you expand this long training camp with the limitations that we had in it. I think it's an advantage really for the offense early. So I think that's what you're seeing. So I expect us to make a pretty big jump from week 1 to week 2 defensively with, really with tackling, with the effort, with running to the football, with communication and making sure we're fitting everything properly. I think all of those things, now that we're kind of in a game mode, I expect us to be much better defensively this week. Well, there's a lot of things he can get better at. We went through on the film. I don't know if if he likes the attention and his name being on the ticker of ESPN and he likes that stuff, then keep doing what he's doing. If he doesn't, go out, throw 3 picks. They won't talk about him anymore. So, I don't know. That's kind of my take on it. I think, he's a guy that's worked really hard to put himself in this position. He's been on the big stage. It's not too big for him. And I think he understands and respects the position he's in and doesn't take it for granted. So I think that's going to be the biggest thing. I don't think he's going to look and say, hey, I don't know, maybe I don't know they'll have 6 touchdown passes every week. That'd be great if he does. And but I think most importantly, him is he's doing his job managing the game, making good decisions, putting us in the right plays, getting the ball out of his hands faster and being accurate. That's the stuff that he worries about. Just like before, he never came in and worried about being the starter. He wanted to be the starter, but he wasn't worried about it. He was worried about improving and getting better. And so now that he's the starter, I think I expect more of the same from him, of just worried about improving and getting better.
So Dan Mullen, after a great start to the season, certainly one of the biggest topics of conversation in the SEC. Sam Pittman did not have an auspicious overall beginning. First half was close, and then it seemed to come undone against his old team, the University of Georgia. Pittman earlier today in Fayetteville.
Well, I think we have to be a lot better on special teams. Georgia dominated us on special teams. We couldn't get off holdups. We obviously gave up a blocked punt on something very simple that we should have. We worked on it, but it just didn't happen in the game. Just blocking, basically. You look at the offense, I think there's still too much indecisiveness about where to line up, I knew that we were going to struggle up front against Georgia's defensive line. I mean, going into the game, I didn't think we was going to be able to pound the ball at them. We got to play better up front. We have to play faster, physical up front on offense. We need to play more players on defense. I think we got tired. We played a lot of snaps in the first half, about the same in the second half. But special teams has to improve in a quick way, and we can fix that. And our offense just has to be more consistent, more urgency. To me, we were just off almost the entire game. Those things we can fix. Costello was incredible. I mean, could throw every throw, was very poised. Coach Leach, I mean, those guys did a great job of preparing that football team. Kylan Hill is the guy that offense runs around, and, man, he is really, really exceptional football player. They're using him a little bit differently, not running him quite as much as he did last year. I anticipate him running him on Saturday, but he's catching the ball out of the backfield and doing a great job. But they've got a lot of receivers that can make plays, and KJ Costello had his career game. I mean, it was unbelievable, and for him to be a transfer and then come in and do what he did was really outstanding.
Okay, we've had a chance to listen to some of the coaches, and we'll try to continue that. We also will we're attempting to get to your phone calls. We think we may be close. We apologize for that, but we have had a pretty rough go of it here the last couple hours. We will take a break. Be right back after this. And we welcome you back. Great to have everyone here on just another Tuesday afternoon. We appreciate you being here. Again, I just want to explain, we've had a couple of issues that happens now and then, especially when storms are out. So we have had a difficulty in getting calls on. So we do apologize for that. We're still working on it, and we don't know when the next one's going to work. But by the way, while we were away, the first postponement of this week, I mentioned the NFL issues, but Troy and South Alabama has been postponed this week. That was a game that was going to be on this weekend. It's been postponed because of COVID. We are, we're a talk show. We love to talk to guests, and we love to talk to callers. The issue right now, and I'm starting to laugh. About 6 weeks ago, this happened, and I freaked out, and I said, you know what? Next time it happens, I'm not going to freak out. When you have bad weather, when somebody, in that case, hit a cable wire. You just do the best you can, and we are going to continue to, because we feel like we're not that far away from solving the problem, so we're all in this together. Meanwhile, we'll listen back to a conversation we had yesterday with John Talty. We welcome you back, and it is really great to welcome our next guest, one of our favorites throughout the entire lead up to the college football beginning, and that is, he is, of course, John Talty from AL.com. And John, it was pretty amazing after all the conversations about should they play, will they play, how can they possibly play. We got our money's worth on week one. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Paul. Absolutely. I mean, the SEC delivered, and I think this past weekend showed just how much we needed the SEC for this season. Just in the fact that, the first couple of weeks, it was good to have college football back, but I don't know if we had that many defining games. And I think the SEC delivered a big one in Mississippi State and LSU. Georgia, Arkansas was surprisingly interesting for a while. You had Vanderbilt, Texas A&M, Kentucky and Auburn was another one. So you had a few really interesting games, and I think just showed just how much the SEC means to college football as a whole, that it kind of drove the conversation this weekend.
Yeah, and I know both of us, because of the proximity to the SEC and the conversations that we normally do. We always get accused by those elsewhere, but it just felt completely different. I know there were some interesting games, but watching LSU get challenged, come back, and then lose, and with Mike Leach, it was just an amazing story. And I guess I'll start with, what does it all mean? Because Mike Leach was expected to have some moments, but none quite like that.
Absolutely. And I think, there's still some skeptics about what Mike Leach is ultimately going to be able to do at Mississippi State. But I think one way of looking at it is, if this is the high point of the Mike Leach era, if it's never going to get better than this, it is already in only a single game better than anything Joe Moorhead did in his 2 years in Starkville. And so that's not to knock Moorhead, who seems like a pretty decent guy, but Leach has already delivered a major moment. He's already delivered a bigger moment than I think a lot of other newer coaches in the SEC. You can certainly argue that he's had a bigger moment than anything Jeremy Pruitt's done at Tennessee to this point. So I think Leach has certainly provided a lot of excitement. There's going to be questions throughout his tenure probably about how that defense holds up and whether it's sustainable when he doesn't have a quarterback like KJ Costello. But at a minimum, he's going to have a fun offense. It's going to put up a lot of points. And I think it's a nice reprieve for Mississippi State fans who certainly have been disappointed the last 2 seasons with what Moorhead was able to do with the talent that Dan Mullen left for him.
Yeah, and it's worth remembering Moorhead originally was not fired because of the bizarre ending of the Egg Bowl. Let me ask you about Leach, though, because it should be pointed out that the University of Tennessee was on the verge of hiring Mike Leach. John Curry had gone all the way to L.A., I think, to meet Leach. And when the president, or the chancellor, I should say, found out about it, she fired him. And that set up the Philip Fulmer hiring, which ultimately set up the Jeremy Pruitt hiring. And John Curry now is at Wake Forest. Why were so many people skeptical of hiring Mike Leach?
Well, I think there's a couple reasons why. And I wrote a story a few years back about how Mike Leach fared in these job interviews. And to put it, succinctly, usually not very well. He is quite the character, as we all know. I think people like you and me can be enamored sometimes by his quirks and his stories and tangents and all things like that. But you have to understand that, when you're interviewing for some of these jobs, if it's not a kind of a slam dunk behind the scenes, already agreed to situation, you're going in front of provosts and deans and people who are academics, and going on weird tangents about pirates might be fun to us, but it's not always fun to a university president who cares a lot more than just football. And so, he was supposed to have the Maryland job a few years back and ultimately bombed his job interview of some of the key people at Maryland. Tennessee had actually interviewed him previous to this most recent time, and kind of was a little weirded out by some of the things that he does. And so I think Starkville is like a perfect place for him. I think he might not necessarily fare as well in a bigger scene just because of kind of the uniqueness to what he does.
I mean, he almost makes Lane Kiffin look like a normal guy.
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing that Deion Sanders might be the third, most interesting person in the state of Mississippi coaching wise now because of Lane and Leach.
Let's talk about some of the ugly from Saturday. I don't think it's ever a good idea to write a school off after one weekend, but when you start doing the math, that was a game Ed Orgeron could not lose. He's got so many tough games ahead, including Alabama and Florida, to say nothing of Auburn. I mean, what's the shape of this program now after 1 week?
Yeah, I think this is looking like a multi-loss LSU team at this point. They had this incredible run last year, really just a perfect storm in every regard. Joe Burrow and Joe Brady and all the talent on defense, and it's all gone now. And so you're seeing a program that is going to have to rebuild some. And I think there were some concerns about how Bo Pelini would transition back to being a defensive coordinator. Certainly had a lot of success at LSU, a decade ago, but had been a Nebraska coach and then had been a coach at Youngstown State. And there were questions about how is he going to transition back. And I have even more questions now after that performance. I don't think he made the adjustments he needed to make. And certainly they were shorthanded without Derek Stingley. But I think that's going to be a situation worth monitoring throughout the season as to whether Pelini can do what he did kind of during his first tenure in LSU. I think Miles Brennan is pretty obviously not Joe Burrow. He's not going to be able to do all the things that he did. And so they're going to have to make adjustments. But I see, Alabama is a loss right now to me. I think Auburn could be a loss. This is probably a 3-loss team potentially just based on losing that first game.
Yeah, and don't forget, as I know you haven't, October 17th at Florida. What's interesting, too, I want to talk about for a second is Will Muschamp. That was just a bizarre game on Saturday night. Maybe some had checked out by then. I don't know why they would have. But, here's a guy that has a job only because his buyout was really too steep last year, isn't it, John?
And we might be having that same conversation at the end of this year in which people think that he should be gone, but ultimately isn't fired just because that buyout is still pretty steep. But that was a game that was really right there for South Carolina. I felt like they had a good shot to win it, ultimately not able to do it. And when you can't win winnable games like that, given the slate they have and the pressure around, it's just going to keep ratcheting up, I think, for Muschamp. And he was one of the guys that I think everybody kind of identified as probably the person on the hottest seat heading into the year. And, blown opportunities like the one on Saturday, I think it's just going to continue that conversation. It's not time to throw in the towel on him yet. I think he's well liked there by players and other people, but certainly the hill got a little steeper after losing a game like that.
And I know you've done a pretty deep dive into the people that run the Southeastern Conference, the ADs, and I want to jump on that because I know we had the Southern Miss coach gone seemingly at halftime of his first game. Maybe they waited to the end. But generally speaking, do you think most will stay the course this year because of the financial ruins of a lot of programs right now? Not ruins, but just hard times.
Yeah, I think, Paul, I think that's the expectation to some extent. I think certainly when you talk to different agents and search firm consultants and people like that, ADs as well, the expectation is that this is going to be a bit quieter of an offseason. But, it's hard to ever think that there's not going to be some changes. We saw Southern Miss already make one. There's always going to be pressure. And so, even with all the things that we know, with all of these schools going through massive, financial deductions in terms of the usual revenue they have, I still wouldn't be shocked if somebody decides to pull the trigger just because there is going to be a lot of pressure and you're going to want to, hoping and assuming things are more normal next year, you're going to want to try to, ramp up that revenue as much as possible. You're going to want to have a packed stadium. And if you're going in with kind of a lame duck coach who doesn't inspire anybody, at some point it might make sense to make a move. And so it's going to be worth watching. And the challenging thing, I think, too, Paul, is just that a lot of the things that we normally look to as reasons why to keep people, bowl games and things like that. This year everybody's going to potentially go to a bowl game. And so it's going to be interesting to see what ADs decide is tolerable for them to keep a person versus deciding that they have to make a move.
Talking to John Talty, and John, the crowds are whatever they are, but I'm particularly interested in what you hear in relation, and some of this has already been announced by various schools, but as you go up and down the top programs in this league, what type of losses are they going to suffer?
Yeah, I mean, it's in the high millions for everybody. I mean, I think you've seen some of the numbers and projections come out. I think it could be anywhere from 50 to 100 million plus. And, some schools are better able to kind of withstand such a loss like that. Alabama, I think, is going to be okay in the long run. But some of these other athletic departments are going to be hit pretty hard. And you're seeing, I think, really across all college sports, layoffs, furloughs, freezing of positions, staff, pay cuts. People are doing everything they can to try to survive, but I don't think we're out of the storm right now. And I think that if this thing continues on, and if they're not able to generate the revenue they're used to, whether it is fan attendance or other things like that, this could be something that impacts college sports, for multiple years. And I think, athletic department leaders and other people are already kind of bracing for that.
Talking to John Talty about the financial aspect, John, it feels like everything is great. And I think it only feels that way because we've had so many gloomy conversations on this show, and it looked like the whole world was coming to an end, but now almost everyone is back. As we move throughout this season, as somebody who has just done such a deep dive into this, what are you keeping your eyes on as telltale signs of the health of getting this season in?
Yeah, I think there are a few things that we're paying attention to, Paul. I think one, certainly, is just going to be about the players, whether they're able to play, what players might be held out from games. We've seen some of that already. Certainly, the same thing applies to coaches. There are going to be some coaches that are going to miss games. Mike Norvell is one of them. I don't think Norvell coaching Florida State would have made much of a difference in that game, given how bad they lost. But, if Nick Saban can't coach in a game or two, that's going to be a pretty massive deal. And so that's something that I think we all are going to be paying attention to, is just, how does that impact games? And then ultimately, I think just whether we're able to get in all these games. We've already seen, a bit of a mess, I think, to start the season with canceled games, postponed games, things like that. The SEC to this point, perfect weekend. Everything went well. I think it showed that their plan to this point made a lot of sense by waiting to when they did. But, I mean, there's still multiple weeks to go, 9 weeks, and then plus an SEC championship game. And so I think whether they're able to kind of survive without having to move any games around or having any games postponed will be kind of a key marker of success for this season.
Yeah, and again, we hate to give them too much good luck after one weekend. It was remarkable that, at least as far as we know, virtually nothing went wrong. I mean, some players may have been missed. But when you compare that, though, John, to even the ACC, the Big 12, it's a pretty remarkable accomplishment.
It is. And, Paul, let's circle back to the beginning of this conversation. It's, again, people like you and me, because we're so SEC-based, people might think that we're being homers because we're praising what the SEC has done. But I think if you just look at it, objectively look at what the SEC has done versus all the other conferences, and I think the SEC's plan has been the smoothest to this point. I think that Greg Sankey has done a really good job in building a plan, and along with other people in that office, of getting to where they are right now. That, again, you don't want to proclaim it a complete success because there's still a lot of weeks to go, and we can look bad looking back in this moment if things go awful the next few weeks. But as of right now, it looks really good. And again, to your point, they've had far less issues as of right now than any of the other conferences, and there's a reason for it. This is the plan that they built.
Well done and well said, and always great to have you with us, John Talty from AL.com. John, thanks. We will talk to you very, very soon. We really appreciate your time. And we are going to head to the break. We've had a busy guest list. We will get back to your phone calls in a moment at 855-242-7285. And welcome back here on a stormy afternoon, at least where we are. And it seems like that storm may be moving out of the area, and maybe it will let us do our program in peace. We certainly apologize for the erratic behavior of me at least, and our show the last hour and 15 minutes. Let's see if we can go back to the calls again. That's really critical because that's what we are all about here. Mark is next. Hey, Mark.
Hey, Paul. Longtime producer, first-time caller. Really, really big fan of the show. I kind of know how Florida State football feels right now.
Ends the losing streak. What's that, Mark?
I said I know how Florida State football feels right now, just unorganized and trying to keep it together. And but hey, look, we came through. So I'm just going to put out an APB, a little call to help call to action to Legend and I-Man and Jim. I need you guys to call up and save the show. Okay, it's been a rough first hour and a half. Paul, do you agree we need sapiens on this show right now?
I have never, Mark, I said this, I've never been calmer. About 6 or 8 weeks ago, we test the equipment. This is not, treehouse radio here or TV, and everything was working. And for some reason, they just always seem to want to cut cords and have outages. And we had a pretty bad storm as well, which I think hit some of the lines right before the show. It never happens in the morning. It never happens when we go off. But I think we're in good shape. And Mark, thanks for comparing the show to Florida State. On behalf of everyone here, we're embarrassed with that comparison. Let's get to this. This first time I've ever done that. I ran Kubiak off the air. Let's go to John in South Carolina. Hello, John.
Hello, Paul. Good to talk to you again. Third time caller, maybe
Thank
fourth.
You very
I can't
much.
remember. But
wonderful.
Just want to comment on Jim Talty, who you had on there. I think it was a recorder from yesterday, but very good sports writer he seems. But when he's on there with those earbuds in, he looks like he's being held hostage somewhere.
John Talty may be being held hostage right now, based on my familiarity with his background.
Right, exactly. But very good sports writer, and looks like he has everything in check for sure. But I wanted to talk about South Carolina and Tennessee. I know we're a couple days removed from that game, but I know prior to all the games in the SEC being played, everyone was like, does Vanderbilt really belong in the SEC? And to comment on Tennessee and South Carolina, I watched that game through the entirety, and it looks like neither one of those two really belong in the SEC, based on that game anyway. Your comments?
Yeah, no, it was a sloppy game, and I think it was Tony Barnhart or Andy Staples yesterday who said that Tennessee team would have lost the game 2 or 3 years ago, or even last year. They were fortunate, but they got out of there, and I think, we've all had things to say about South Carolina, but the problem for Will Muschamp in year 5 is you just can't waste opportunities like that, and they did.
Right, absolutely. Well, turnovers, there were 2 of them, and again, those always hurt, as well as the penalties, but you got to avoid those, and if you can't get a team to avoid them, your highly likelihood of winning games is going to probably not be there. So
yeah, you're right. And John, thank you for the call. I appreciate it. Jacob is up next. Hey, Jacob, go right ahead.
Hey, Paul, how are you doing today?
We are doing okay, thank you.
I just wanted to call and elaborate a little bit on last week. I called in saying Mississippi State, I thought they had a chance. Little did I know my Bulldogs were going to come out and show out like they did. As far as the rest of the season goes, what are you thinking before I share you my thoughts?
I feel great. Listen, when you win a game like that, it just sends your program into outer space. And to me, I think I don't think I appreciated the talent that was on that team. I had not seen Costello play at Mississippi State. I'd seen him play at Stanford, but Highland. There's just so many great players, and I just it's amazing how little Joe Moorhead got out of this bunch.
Yeah, he was awful. As far as the rest of the season goes, I look at us going undefeated into the Bama game. It's feeling like a little 2014 action here in Starkville, so I feel like we go into the Bama game undefeated. I feel like it'll be a tough-fought game. I figure we go 8-2 for the rest of the season. 9-1 possibly.
Well, I remember that game in 2014, and that was a 1 versus 2 game or 1 versus 3 game. I can't remember. That was an amazing day. Yeah, and quite frankly, State had a great chance to win that game. Hey, thank you for the call. Appreciate it. It is exciting. We're going to get back to normal Finebaum show tomfoolery here in a minute. More of your phone calls at 855-242-7285.
Well, it's pretty obvious that it was a good win for the opening game of the season. I think anytime you win a game in the SEC, you got to be really happy about that. I thought we really played well in the first half, which sort of goes to show the preparation, the focus that the players had, going into the game, the good job that they did, sort of overcoming all the uncertainties and the disruptions that we had getting ready for the first game. But we also didn't maintain our intensity throughout the game. I don't think we really played with the same energy and enthusiasm in the second half. And I think it showed, in our performance. As I said after the game, after first games, you find out who you are, where you are, what you have to do to get better. So the big focus is on what do we have to do to get better. And I think improvement is a word that we use a lot. And hopefully we'll be able to get a lot of players to make a significant amount of improvement this week so that we can play better. We're certainly, looking forward to home opener, Saturday. So it'd be great to bring football back to Tuscaloosa, playing Bryant-Denny Stadium. So we're certainly looking forward to that. Texas A&M is a very good team. Jimbo has done a really good job there. They've got like 16 starters back from last year's team, 7 or 8 on each side of the ball. Got a really good running back. Quarterback's got a lot of experience, very good player. Offensive line has 4 out of 5 starters back. Spiller's a good running back. They got really good players. They've got 7 or 8 starters back on defense, and their defense was ranked last year, played very well last week against Vanderbilt and only given up 12 points. So this is going to be a much more challenging game for us. It's a good all-around team. They play well on special teams. They've got good specialists. So it's going to be necessary for us to make a significant amount of improvement and play for 60 minutes in this game because of the type of team we're playing against.
And we welcome you back to the program. And I'm just following directions right now. I'm confused. Did somebody tell me in all that maze we were about to go to a guest? Is that correct? Oh, okay. Well, hey, well, good. I just wanted, I am taking no chances today. Roman Harper joins us, of course, the former great at Alabama with the Saints, now with the SEC Network. And Roman, it's great to have you on the program. I thought I saw your name there, but I wasn't sure. How are you doing? And I can't wait to get your reaction to the weekend, especially what happened down in Baton Rouge.
You guys have had some technical difficulties, but we're going to work through it. The same way LSU is going to have to work through this season.
What did you see? And I know with Stingley out, they were certainly shorthanded, but there's no way to simulate him being back. But what did you see that went wrong, or was it the fact that Mike Leach just took advantage of Bo Pelini's mishaps, the defensive coordinator, I should say, of LSU?
Yeah, they of course, look, you can play man-to-man coverage. I've been hearing a lot of people saying, oh, why do you play all this man-to-man versus crossing routes? And as a former DB, man-to-man versus crossing routes, there's nothing wrong with that. That's what everybody does, and that's what everybody tries to combat it with offensively, especially on third and shorts. But what you have to do is be able to talk out communication on the second and the secondary to pass off all these crossers. Whenever you have 2 receivers right beside each other, first of all, you need your defensive backs on different levels, and also if one goes under, you need to pass it off so the inside guy takes him across. And what a lot of these guys on the outside, what Mississippi State did a great job of, is really condensing the formation. So now they could either go across on a shallow cross and pick the other guys off, or they'd also run fade balls on the outside. That's why I like my corners to press with outside leverage to try and eliminate or slow down that outside release on the fade ball. So it's just, look, at the end of the day, I give Mississippi State more credit than really just knocking on LSU. I thought Mississippi State and KJ Costello, I thought the way he was able to manipulate the pocket, move around, and be able to just throw from different angles and make things happen, I thought it was more about Mississippi State making plays than the lack of LSU. I thought LSU's DBs didn't do great. Of course, they could have played better in some situations. But overall, I was just so proud to see Mississippi State go out there and play the way they did. And, Paul, that's what we all turned in for on Saturdays. It's for the upset. If we'd be so bored with college football if every week the teams that were supposed to win just went out there and won. But this was the first feeling of real joy, or like, oh man, somebody lost that we were not expecting to. It was great to see, and it was fun to watch.
Roman, State was not expected to be great this year, middle of the pack, after one sample, albeit against a national champion. What do you see for Mike Leach's team the rest of the way? I mean, how far can they go?
Well, they definitely can go far. I don't think LSU did them any disservice. They didn't get much going offensively. It was more that they were just trying to stay ahead of it. I think Mississippi State will continue to be. They'll still be the third or fourth best team in the SEC. But I saw a lot from both teams out of the state of Mississippi this year that put everybody else on alert that, hey, these two teams will be able to score and put up points. If they're able to cause a turnover or take the ball away or get a few stops here and there, they're going to be very dangerous, and they're going to beat quite a few teams in the SEC this year. There's no way that you can not expect Mississippi State to roll off 5 wins, 6 wins. Same thing for Ole Miss.
Roman Harper with us. Roman, in terms of the good, we know who they are, but there's a lot of question marks out there, especially at Texas A&M, which rolls into Tuscaloosa this weekend. What did you make out of A&M and maybe not corrected in time for this week, but their outlook?
Yeah, you know what? I saw a lack of weapons on the outside for Kellen Mond to go to. I also saw Kellen Mond just did not look like he was pulling the trigger like he needed to. I'm waiting on him to continue to take that next step. How many more times are we going to have that conversation, right? And how many more times are we going to have to overlook Jimbo Fisher and what he has to do with this and just put it all on Kellen Mond? It is the coach that drives the bus. It is the coach's ship that's going along. Kellen Mond is just directing the offense. So Jimbo Fisher, I understand he's going to start continuing to get more and more pressure, because if Kellen Mond is not the guy that's going to help your program get to where we expect you guys to be once you cash that check that Jimbo's got, then who is it? Why have you not found that replacement? And who else is making the decisions around here? So is Kellen Mond going to be able to continue to just mosey along this whole season? Are they just going to continue to just be 4 or 5 wins? I did not like what I saw at Texas A&M. And look, I give Vanderbilt a lot of credit because they were pesky. They played hard. And, but Vanderbilt always does that. But they just do not have the athletes. And you could not see a difference in athleticism when it came to Texas A&M when you watch Texas A&M play against Vanderbilt. And that's not going to be good if you're going to sit up here and now think you're going to keep it close or have a chance to beat Alabama this weekend, who we all saw and thought came out and looked very strong under Mac Jones and that offense, came out doing what they were doing. And not only that, but Dylan Moses looked outstanding. I thought he was a difference maker in that game and on that defense immediately.
Talking to Roman Harper. Roman, the biggest game of the weekend is going to be in Athens. Auburn looked good at times, survived Kentucky, but your level of concern for the Dogs, and we don't know what JT Daniels is going to look like at Georgia, but he's probably going to look better than what they had.
Yeah, look, my only complaint, well, I got 2 complaints with Georgia. Number one, you got to find a way to run the ball. I was waiting for at some point them to just say, hey, look, Todd Monken, I love your offense and what you're doing for us, but can we get a fullback in an I-back formation and do what Georgia does and push some people around? Because the run game was absent the whole game. They were not able to move Arkansas, and I thought that's a place where you always just know Georgia's going to be able to run the ball. So they need to be able to run the ball if you're going to protect this quarterback, whoever that may be. And also, they got to get the ball to George Pickens. I don't know how you go about doing this. They got to find a way. This guy is too exciting of a player. He's too great of a young player that will only continue to get better. You got to find ways to exploit him and get him the ball a little bit more. I don't know what they're going to do. I don't know how JT Daniels is going from not playing, not practicing, I don't even know, to where now he could possibly be the starter in 1 week. And we know we need to rush him through this process, but still, it's going to take a lot of things. I like Georgia's matchup versus Auburn because Bo Nix, for as great as he was at moments last weekend against Kentucky, still showed me some problems, some things that scared me, which is a lot of his footwork. He's kind of all over the place in the pocket. He's really quick to escape the pocket and get out of there, and he's got the talent and the arm to do those things. But consistently, when you play a really good defense, Georgia's not going to allow you to get away with a lot of those things that he was able to get away with against Kentucky.
Yeah, I want to ask you one more question about that, because I've heard you talk about Bo Nix in the past, and Auburn fans love him. He's had an amazing run for a sophomore, but when do those things get corrected, Roman?
So, Paul, look, I try and attack problems, not people. And everybody knows my allegiances and where I've been throughout the state of Alabama. So for me, it's more of this. Because if you do not nip these bad habits in the bud early, they will continue to progress and he will never get better. And he can never reach the pinnacle to what he could be. Bo Nix has a very high ceiling. He has one of the highest ceilings in all the SEC when it comes to quarterbacks. Everybody talks about what Kyle Trask did this past weekend. Bo Nix is a better quarterback when it comes to just overall talent level. He has a higher ceiling. He can do a lot more because he's more athletic with a stronger arm. But are you going to get the mental aspect of the game? Are you going to be consistently staying in the pocket, reading your 1 to 2 to 3 guys that you need to get the ball to, and doing the progressions that we're expecting you to do? You continue to break the pocket when nobody's there. You continue to throw off your back foot, throwing it out there, letting your athletes make plays. That just will not go on. And I'm not talking about college football. I'm talking about with these guys that all want to go to the NFL. That's all their dreams and aspirations is to go to the NFL, Paul. And if you do not get these things corrected, everybody will chastise you and be talking about how bad of a quarterback and how inconsistent you are at the next level. And that is where I can't help it that is where my eyes always lead me to, is what's not good enough to be on the NFL level. And Bo Nix, for as good as he could be at Auburn, that's not his end goal. His end goal is not to be a great quarterback at Auburn. I promise you, it's probably to be a great quarterback on Sundays. And he has to get these problems fixed. And I want his coaches to continue to harp on these things so then he can reach the potential that he has.
Roman, great to have you on. Always appreciate it. You be well, and we will talk soon.
Thanks, Paul. Appreciate you having me.
You got it. Great conversation there, Roman Harper. We are off and running. We're back. We've had liftoff. And we welcome you back on a Tuesday afternoon. Let's check in with John next in Baton Rouge.
Good evening, Paul.
Hey there.
How you doing?
I am doing great, John. Thank you for calling.
Good. I'm a long-time listener, first-time caller.
Well, that is fantastic. Great to have you here.
I enjoy your show. It's going to be a long year for LSU this year. You're going to find out exactly what the coach has made out. He lost his defense, his offensive coordinator. He's not a good coach, but they wanted to hire him.
John, hold on a second. We're talking about Ed Orgeron here.
Yeah, I know. Well, Paul, he never had a winning season nowhere he went. Right?
Well, he had a winning season well, I take it back. He came in interim. He did okay the year. I mean, he's done okay at LSU.
Yeah, well, but guess what? He had a good team. But we're going to see what's going to happen this year and the next couple of years. I think they might go 8-4 this year. What you think?
Well, I think it's impossible to tell right now, John, and I'm not one that usually hedges my bet, but I want to see them in another meaningful game, and they won't get that for a few weeks. But I think that remember there's only 10 games, so I think 7 wins is perhaps the ceiling.
Well, let me ask you a question. The quarterback, he looked like he was lost. Looked like he didn't know what he was doing.
He did. I agree with you on that.
Now, maybe he's going to improve, but from what I've seen Saturday, he's going to need a lot of improvement.
Well, I think losing Jamar Chase was a big deal. I think Stingley being out of there was a big deal. And, I was underwhelmed by Bo Pelini, but I'm in a cast of thousands on that regard.
Okay. Well, I'm going to be listening. You have a good day.
Thank you very much. I appreciate you calling. Trucker is up next. Hey, Trucker.
Hey, how you doing, Paul?
We are doing great.
All right. Alabama is looking great this year. I work out here in Mississippi during the week, and it seems like since they got that big win against LSU, that they think they can take down the Tide this year. They're about crazy, aren't they?
Everybody thinks they can take down the Tide. That's
the truth. That is definitely the truth. But we know, and everybody in the state of Alabama, Alabama fans know that we are going to bring home another national championship.
Well, I tend to agree with you on that. Hey, thank you very much for the call. Let's check in with Spencer, who is up next. Hey, Spencer.
How's it going, Paul? Enjoy your show between you and First Take.
Thank you.
Enjoy your show.
Thank
what do you
very
think
much.
the ceiling is for Mississippi State after this win over LSU?
It's one better than I originally thought.
Yeah, it was a shock. It was a surprise.
I think it's pretty good. I mean, I still don't know. I still would question the Alabama game, maybe Auburn. But I think 7 wins is definitely doable, maybe a little better.
We're on the same page. Hey, Paul, whatever happened to Bobby?
Unfortunately, Bobby passed away a couple of months ago.
Wow, that's sad. My condolences go out to his
family. He was
family.
such a great person. Yeah, he had been sick, and I think ultimately it got to him. I believe we talked to. They've talked to his wife. I know we talked to 1 or 2 of his friends, but Spencer, thanks for asking. That he's such a great person. Appreciate the call. We're up against a break. We are back up and running here.
Be good.
And we thank you, Spencer. Be well. We'll be right back. 2 more hours to go.
We knew we were waiting to see how much growth Bo Nix showed. Certainly a good start here in his sophomore season. Up front on both lines of scrimmage, Coach, Auburn had to replace some real key pieces. What did you see in the trenches for Auburn in this game?
Well, specifically on both sides of the ball where you thought Kentucky had an advantage, you mentioned it earlier, Roman, they didn't. It was just that simple. Defensively, I thought you saw a young defense grow up today. They didn't play great in the first half. Kentucky went to some unbalanced sets. They were running the football. But you know what? Coach Steele just kept at it. He didn't complicate the game plan. He let these guys start playing fast. People talk about the defensive line that they replaced. They also replaced almost the entire secondary. Today you saw McCrary. He picks, it was a 100-yard pick six almost, right? Smoke Monday. All these guys in the secondary that are young, Christian Tutt, these guys are good. These guys at Kentucky couldn't separate for these guys from the secondary most of the day today. They smothered the route. So I think you're going to see a defense at Auburn that's all we talked about last year. They will get better.
Yeah, I like the fact that, look, I shout out to my man Crime Dog, Coach McGriff.
Absolutely.
Coaching the DBs there at Auburn. He is going to challenge the receivers. And I think Auburn defensively will be in every game because D-back-wise, the DBs will be in everybody's face and have great press, man-to-man coverages. And that is going to allow you to stay close to guys and stay connected and allow for that young D lineman to actually start to get after these guys.
I think we need to be honest, though. You know, we've given Kentucky's coaching staff a lot of credit over the last couple of years. I want to place some blame at their feet today. I thought they did a couple things that did not jive well with what their strengths were, particularly at the goal line. The play deciding to throw at the 1 yard line instead of running the football reminded me of the Super Bowl with New England and Seattle and not running Marshawn Lynch down there. Like, you got the best offensive line in the conference, perhaps. Why not run the football there? They throw the interception, not a well-thrown pass by Terry Wilson. And then I still haven't got an explanation on the fake punt. I don't know if that was a call or if that was something that the punter made a read on. But in that situation, you basically lost the game right there at your own 30-yard line late in the fourth quarter when it was only a one-possession game.
And Kentucky's not good enough to have 3 turnovers and go into Auburn and win that game. You have to be better. You got to play a clean game when you're already the underdog.
The last time we talked, things were really grim, and you were holding up very well, and a lot of people didn't know what was next, but we are delighted to welcome you back under slightly sunnier skies. Good afternoon.
Hi, Paul. Thanks for having me, and you're right. We're a little more optimistic than we were. I guess we have a reasonable chance now to play a representative season, but thanks for having me.
Yeah, I heard it in your voice the last time. I mean, you're a cautious, thoughtful man. You knew the challenge ahead, but you were committed to trying to move forward. What has it been like going from the uncertainty, watching college football explode in certain parts of the country around us, in addition to the country, and finally get to a point where, yeah, there are problems, but we're seeing football on Saturday.
Well, that's well put, Paul. There are problems still, but we are seeing football. We thought we had good medical protocols in place. We thought we were getting really sound medical advice. We moved ahead. I think the fact that we have had to postpone and even cancel some games shows that the medical protocols are working. There were a couple of games there, Paul, we probably could have played, but because of an abundance of caution, we decided ultimately that we shouldn't do it. But I think that shows that we've put health and safety first. On the other hand, we have been able to play. We haven't, at this point, seen evidence of transmission of the virus on the field, and that's obviously really important. Knock on wood, we're still doing more research, but we've had a couple of instances where teams we played have had positives, but we've had none, zero. The young men have been working really hard to avoid the virus. The contact tracing quarantines, we've worked hard on that. And are trying, we're working with local health authorities and others to try to determine, the best way to do these things. Everything is still a work in progress. My good friend and your good friend Greg Sankey said recently that Fridays used to be good days, and they're not so much fun anymore because, as you just don't know from day to day and hour to hour how the testing is going to come out. But we're reasonably optimistic now. I think when we get into conference play, things will be even better. We've had some issues with non-conference games. They're tougher to deal with because everybody, Paul, has different protocols, and you've got to really nail it down. In the league, everybody's been working together for 6 or 7 months on various things. Plus, we've had, fortunately, we had the outbreak at Memphis, but beyond that, we've had virtually no positives, very, very few since then with all of our teams. So that's a hopeful sign.
And I know in every case, Commissioner, you try to learn. The Memphis case, did disintegrate for whatever reason. But as we move into October here this week, what do you think will be different? Because things are changing, even in the treatment, not so much of the virus, but in the testing protocols and to the degree of testing.
Well, Paul, we started off with one test, then we were going to go to 2. Now we're up to 3. We're doing 2 PCR tests, which are the gold standards, Mondays and Wednesdays. We're doing an antigen test on Friday, which, while it isn't quite as sensitive, it's a great safeguard. And so testing has really improved dramatically, and I think that'll be important as you go forward. But I think everybody's learned that there's certain things you can't do. We think that in Memphis, part of the outbreak was just getting together with friends and family after the game and doing the kinds of things you normally do. But everybody's had to really, look at things and say we can't do some of the things we would normally do. And I think we've learned that. We've also, we've improved our protocols in terms of how we practice, how we have meals together, all the kinds of things that can help prevent a spread. Because as you know, a few positives can really, deal you a blow. So I think we've learned some things, and I'm really, again, I'm looking forward to the next few weeks. But, again, you hold your breath each day, each hour, because you don't know how the test results are going to come in. You may be great one week. You may have some issues the next. And it's proven to be a highly transmissible disease. But on the other hand, we have found that, we can deal with it. We can deal with the protocols. We can keep our players healthy and safe. And again, there are ways you can contract this that don't have anything to do with playing football, and we just have to deal with it.
Commissioner, as you look around the country, I know you're very collegial, have collegial relationships with your other commissioner friends and colleagues. Do you have any insight? And I'm not asking you to speak for someone else, but just the vagaries of so many conferences shutting down and then their decisions to come back. Do you think that is as a result of what you just got through talking about, the better protocols and the better testing availability?
I think that was part of it all. Again, I don't want to, the last thing I want to do is criticize anyone, but we felt that the protocols in place were sound back when we decided to play. We obviously took, a calculated risk, but we felt that the testing was adequate at the time and would get even better. We're still concerned that some of the reports of various testing don't quite meet our standards at this point. Maybe they will down the road. Because again, the PCR tests are still the gold standard. I'm not a doctor, and I don't want to, get into the weeds with your listeners on this. But again, we respect the decisions people took. But again, and I don't know what. I guess you have to take everyone at their word. Certainly, the concerns we dealt with myocarditis. We brought in a nationally respected cardiologist, so did the SEC, so did the ACC, talked to everyone about those protocols. That was certainly something that could have derailed us back in the summer, but didn't. But look, I'm glad, Paul, that everyone is back playing in some fashion. I do have some things to say about how I think the competitive aspects of this should be viewed, and hope you ask me that. But, but again, in terms of health and safety, there are improvements every day, but we wouldn't have started if we didn't think we could do it safely.
Well, you know what the next question is. So let's talk about the competitiveness, because there are a lot of interpretations, and I know in your league you've got a team or a couple of teams that may end up staking a claim later on. Make your case.
Well, first of all, that's the fun part of this. When we talked previously, I really didn't even want to talk about this. But now, of course, your competitive juices start flowing, and we're playing again, and I think it's perfectly legitimate and appropriate to talk about it. I think that the number of games you play this year should absolutely matter and should be a significant factor. If the gap is wider, for example, than maybe 1 or 2 games. As you know, teams have lost games in the past because of a hurricane or some other issue, and it hasn't really been a big deal. Although, as you may recall, in 2014, the Big 12 may have lost a playoff spot because they didn't have the so-called 13th data point. And so even then, that extra game meant something. The gap could be wider this year, and why should it not matter now? Yes, there's been a pandemic, and those conferences, made decisions based on health and safety, and we absolutely respect that. But they did make their choices, and we decided to play. We placed as much importance on health and safety as they did, but ultimately reached a different decision. The SEC did, the ACC did. We took a lot of heat, we took a lot of risk. I don't think, Paul, that we should necessarily establish a threshold of games that, again, that you have to play to qualify for this or that. No one knows at this point which teams are going to play which number of games. The season is going to still have disruption, but I think playing more games is a better indicator of something, of what you've done. It's one thing, I think, to say, okay, we're not going to require a threshold. There's not going to be a minimum number of games to qualify for this or that, whether it's the CFP, whether it's New Year's Day. But it seems to me it's quite another to say that the number of games doesn't matter. I've seen writers say recently, well, I'm just going to look at the resume. I don't care about the number of games. I'm not going to be biased by that. I don't think it's an issue of bias. I think that, the more games you play, Paul, the more you take risks, the more, you can lose those games. You also risk more injury. I think you should get credit for playing additional games. If you play 4 or 5 more games than a particular team, you're likely to get more beaten up. And if you win those games and you play 9, 10, 11 games, even 12 games, we've got some teams that could possibly even play, as many as 13. There's a lot of wear and tear. And, teams that, again, are starting in late October and November, it's great that they're playing. I don't know whether they'll play non-conference games. We were able to play a few, and that is an indicator for us, as you know. But a number of factors, I think, have to be weighed in this equation. And I don't think you should discount the fact that, we've played games in September and October because others aren't playing. And this year, especially, as you know, teams have had to work really hard to stay free of the virus. They've taken risks. They found good solutions, and other conferences are following, which is good. But I don't think you can ignore that. And again, rewarding teams that played far fewer games, I just don't think, depending on the circumstances, we'll have to weigh it out, But, again, if you've played essentially a month and a half and somebody else has been playing 3.5 months, I think that at least has to be taken into consideration. And I think that's my point. Now, as far as ranking teams, Paul, that have not played, I just don't think that makes any sense. It's one thing to have a beauty contest at the beginning of the year and rank teams that haven't played, but it seems to me you might want to wait. It just doesn't make sense. And also, it's going to be very bizarre anyway when those teams start to play, because you'd be ranking a team that might be 1-0 or 2-1 or 1-1 when others have played anywhere from 4, 5, 6, even 7 games. So, again, that's going to be an issue that we'll all have to look at. But that's again, my feeling about how the season should play out. I'm not saying that someone who's played more games automatically gets preference, but certainly if we've got a 10-0 team or an 11-0 team or a 10-1 team, and somebody else has only played 6 or 7 or 8 games, I think that out of it be taken into serious consideration.
Commissioner, before you go, it's one thing to have rankings, but it's another thing. It's the only thing that really matters when it gets down to the college football playoff. I know you know these people. How are you communicating with them what you just got through telling all of us?
Well, we'll have a chance. When the CFP meets, we have a chance to talk about how we view this. And again, we're not advocating for a threshold of games. We're not suggesting somebody should be eliminated because they didn't play a certain number of games. But it's something that we'll probably be able to talk about. We can't talk to the selection committee per se, Paul. You can't have communication directly with them. They do have representatives that can talk to you and do talk to you during the season and gather information, and you can be opinionated in those conversations. But I think it's, the other thing I'll be talking about, Paul, and you're not surprised, I'm sure, to hear this, is that I think our conference plays like a P5 conference. We've got some really powerful teams in Cincinnati, in UCF, and in Memphis. We think Houston is a sleeper. We think that SMU is a very good team, and we look at Tulsa, which really should have beaten Oklahoma State. Had them on the ropes, made some mistakes, lost their best running back, and then lost their linebacker, who's going to be a pro player in the second half, and still almost won the game. And we've got a lot of good teams in this league, and I think we play at that level. So I'm hoping that we get some attention. Sometimes it's still a P5 world, but look at Dylan Gabriel. I don't know that there's a quarterback who's played as well as Dylan Gabriel. He's a little under the radar still, but he's an absolutely spectacular player. And look at Derek King. And he did well in our league. He was much more under the radar in our league than he is now, but we have good players in this league, and I'll be making that point as well as we go forward, and others will be making their points as well. But I think this league, if you have a team toward the end of the year that has a loss or two, it should still be seriously considered for either the playoff or the New Year's Day. And in part, we're an 11-team league now, Paul, and all the top teams are playing each other. Sometimes, in division play, you might get 2 teams that are undefeated playing in our championship game, or 2 teams that are 1 loss. But all our good teams at this point, all our top teams are probably, I think they're all playing each other pretty much. So it's going to be a very rugged schedule. We're looking forward to it. We're happy everybody's back. We're happy that college football's back. But we also know that it's a long road, and that every time you start feeling relaxed, you watch a game on Saturday and you feel like things are normal. They're not. You look at the stands, you look at the sidelines, you realize that you're going to get testing results over the weekend. So it's not normal, Paul, but it's better than it was.
No doubt. Commissioner Mike Oresco. Mike, Commissioner, it's always great to have you here. Come back soon, and I have a feeling there'll be some interesting debates as we head toward late November, early December. All the best to you.
Thank you, Paul. It's always great to be with you, and thanks again for your kind words. Take care and stay well, and you and your family and all your listeners.
Thank you so much. Commissioner Mike Oresco, just a fantastic conversation. Former CBS sports executive, and before that he was at ESPN. And very few people understand the nuances of this industry better than him. We will take a break. Your phone calls continue at 855-242-7285. We'll head down to Baton Rouge in the final hour.
Hey there, good Tuesday to you, Dari Noka, with your SEC update. You know, to this point, the lone SEC school not to allow fans at its home football games is Vanderbilt. Well, they actually made the decision not to allow them, but their first home game is actually this Saturday. Now, they say they will allow some fans. Vandy has announced they'll allow limited student attendance for its first home game Saturday night against LSU. Masks will be required, services like concessions will not be open, and senior undergrads will get the first shot at attending. Head coach Derek Mason on this call.
Logistically, we haven't had a football game here, okay, man, in a while. And so, man, as you start to talk about game logistics and, as we ramp up, man, we want our players' families here. We want our fan base here. We want our own families here. But it has to start somewhere. And as you look at a ramp up and what we're looking to do, the idea of, a population that's already within our bubble, so to speak, that's getting tested is the first wave. And that's the way we need to move here at Vanderbilt so that we can get our parents and our fan base back here, as soon as possible.
And we're back, and Dave is up next in Pennsylvania. Good afternoon, Dave.
Hey, Paul, how are you?
I'm doing well, thank you.
Hey, thanks for taking my call. I'm a big fan of yours. You do a great job of your show.
Thank you so much. Thank you very much.
My question is, based on what I just saw from the commissioner of the ACC, Notre Dame's in, right?
Well, I think what Commissioner Oresco said is interesting. Certainly, he's pushing for his own schools, but I don't think he's trying to set a primer with UCF and obviously Cincinnati. But I'm not prepared. I don't think quantity really matters this year. And I think it's great that his programs got off to an early start and have had to endure. But you know what? The college football playoff should be about the 4 best teams, not those who have endured the most off the field.
I agree with you, Paul. And it's just funny. It's like in this day and age of the way things are going, we're fortunate we can watch college football, which we're all big fans of, right?
Oh, sure. And listen, I know Mike Oresco, and he's doing what he should do. But the problem was it's too early to start trying to put those bobs in the water. I mean, you have to wait. And if one of your schools emerges in late October, November as a dominant team, UCF is already trying to claim it's the best school in Florida, which is UCF's modus operandi. And then you start making the claim. But right now, I don't think you should decide this on the number of games you play. And yeah, did the Pac-12 make a mistake? Did the Big 12 make a mistake? It's not like they made a mistake for selfish interest. I mean, they were costing themselves tens, if not hundreds of millions of dollars by making the decision they did.
Paul, you're absolutely right. And the biggest thing is we're fortunate they can all play because we're getting to enjoy what we pay taxes for, live and die for.
Well, thank you very much, Dave, and it was really good to hear from you from Pennsylvania. How about Brett in Louisiana? Hey, Brett, you're on the air.
Hi there, Paul. I just got a quick comment to make. So obviously I'm from Louisiana, so I'm going to try to defend LSU because I hear a lot of people are ruling them out. And I guess all I really have to say is that during that game, I was there inside the stadium with the limited capacity. There were some play calls that I found egregious, specifically near the end of the game. We were actually up at that point. They called an incomplete pass on Mississippi State when it was clearly a fumble. And so Mississippi State never really should have got the ball. And even if they did win, in which they did, obviously, I'm not going to pretend like LSU didn't play softly. People are pretending that Mississippi State is this awful team, but Mike Leach, he's coach years. Utah, my dad's from, they used to play Utah when Utah would be favored by like 33 points, and they would kick Utah's butt. So I just want to say that I really believe that LSU, I wouldn't doubt if they get 70 points on Vandy next week, and I really don't think they should be written off yet. And I hope the college football playoff is fair to the teams in the SEC and ACC that are playing 10 games rather than those in the Big 10 and Big 12 playing less.
Thank you very much. Casey is up next in Florida. Hey, Casey. Good afternoon.
Hey, Paul. How's it going? I want to say I appreciate you getting me on the show. Big Ole Miss fan, Ole Miss grad, and I just have a question. First couple drives on Saturday's game against Florida, we saw John Rice Plumlee on the field quite a bit, and Ole Miss had success. Whether or not it was Plumlee having success, just his presence on the field seemed like it drew some attention towards him and maybe away from other people. Now, we didn't see him so much after the first quarter, and Ole Miss's success went downhill. Why do you think that was, and do you expect to see Plumlee more in upcoming games?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I mean, I think Corral is. I just think that's every time you do that, you end up debating and having to deal with various issues when you're bouncing quarterbacks around. Anyway, have to run to a break here. We went a little bit over there. More phone calls at 855-242-7285, and we are coming right back. And we welcome you back, and Milo is up next. Hey, Milo.
Paul, you are doing a fine job. How are you today?
I am doing great. Thank you.
I just wanted to ask you about that compelling interview with Mike Oresco. Now, I'm not trying to be ugly here, but is his son or daughter the producer of your show?
No.
No. Well, then maybe you need to ask somebody there behind the camera, behind the mic, how does a clown like that get a half hour on the show? Because I turned on the show, and he's on talking, coach speak. I go have a couple beers, come back, and he's still on. He's on for a half hour, Paul. Come on, you got to get the,
Yeah, well, he was on for about 12 minutes, and I don't know where you went to get a beer, but it must have been pretty quick.
Yeah, well, you know me, Paul. Hey, okay, next thing. Are you still doing on Saturday morning that SEC Nation pregame show?
No.
Okay. Well, I'm sorry to hear that because you were doing a fine job before. Now, about the same time, I want to change lanes here just for a minute. On ESPN, they have College Game Day. You familiar with that show?
Vaguely, yes.
Vaguely. Okay. Well, now my sources in Memphis are telling me that when Lee Corso retires or leaves the show, that his chair has your name on it. Is that correct?
I've never heard that before.
Well, it's out there, Paul, and I know all the folks up in Bristol are hearing that too. So, Paul, as always, you're doing a great job. Don't ever change. Let's have lunch sometime.
Love to. Thank you. Man, I felt like I was being sworn in for a deposition there. Chandler is up next. Hey, Chandler. Good afternoon.
Hey, Paul. Big fan of the show. I just wanted to ask you today what you're thinking about the Ole Miss-Kentucky game this week and how you think the Rebs match up. And then moving on for that, what do you think the ceiling is for the Rebs football team is this very weird season?
I think it's pretty good. I think this will be a really tough game for them to win, but this game is in Kentucky. Is that right? I would assume, yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
I think 500 would be about the ceiling I would go with for Ole Miss. I know that may not sound like it's great, 5 wins, but I think when you look at the schedule, it's realistic. I don't see them doing any better.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. Hopefully moving forward into next season, Kiffin can start to turn things around a little bit. But I appreciate your time, Paul.
Thank you, but I really do like the Kiffin hire. I mean, there is no doubt about that. How about Joel in Florida? You are next up. Hey, Joel.
Hi, Paul. It's Joel from Florida, the UCF fan.
Great to hear from
you. I
was
really impressed with Commissioner Oresco, and I wanted to follow up on that point he made. Do you think the Big Ten and the Pac-12 teams should be ranked, not playing games for another month?
I am not crazy. I would not rank them because I just don't see the value in it. And without having seen them play, how do you rank them? I thought Oresco made a good point. It's a beauty contest before the season, but if I'm looking at who are my top 4 teams right now, in the back of my mind, I think Ohio State is, but I haven't seen them play yet. So how can I vote them in? And by the way, it doesn't matter, but ultimately they'll be in as soon as they start playing here in 3 weeks.
Right, but it's like he said. If they end up playing the 6 or 7, some of those teams play 6 or 7 games. And let's say Ohio State goes 6-1.
But here's what I will say though: if Ohio State plays Nebraska on the 24th and they look like I expect them to look, then they would be in my top 4. But why would I put them in my top ranking? Now, hey, anyway, I hate to run. We are heading to a break. We have 1 more hour to go on this calm, cool, serene afternoon. We will talk to Scott Rabelais.
Your immediate reaction when you started to see the stat column for KJ Costello's passing yards go up and up and up and up throughout the day Saturday?
Yeah, Alyssa, out of that 623, over 300 of those were yards after the catch. I mean, that's what the air raid strives to do. It tries to use picks and rubs and crossing routes to get guys open. LSU played into their hands by playing not so great man coverage. We know Derek Stingley was out with the illness that he suffered Friday night. We hope that he's a lot better. Health and well wishes to him. But LSU on defense failed to adjust over the course of that game, played a defensive structure that was just getting absolutely exploited by Mississippi State all day long. I mean, you do not see an LSU secondary get torched like that. You do not see an LSU secondary get outclassed and look that slow on a football field.
Yeah, I'd have to agree. I think for me, LSU's defense was the thing that stood out for me and just how they got bombed on. And I know the storyline is going to be how Costello bombed on them for about 700 yards, but that's not even the most disappointing thing for me. The most disappointing thing for me was how they looked while they were getting bombed on. Look, they looked tired, they looked confused, and they really just looked outmatched. And I don't know if I've ever seen an LSU team look like this. And the thing that we know about the SEC is that it's a copycat league. So they're going to see these same plays, like RJ said, these crossing routes, they're going to see that next week and the week after that and the week after that. So if they don't get this going fast, it might be a long year for these LSU Tigers. Spencer, what you got?
I think RJ and Brandon, we can all agree that they weren't going to defend anything. But I want to go ahead and give a little bit of credit for the Bandito. Maybe the more appropriate term is the Pirate. That would be Mike Leach and the Mississippi State offense. Because if you weren't going to defend it, well, someone's got to take it. And they took all day long against them. Keep in mind, we've been doing this through a pandemic. So have football teams. So did Mississippi State. Costello didn't get into Starkville until June. And in the span of basically 2 months, charitably, they put together an offense that went into Baton Rouge and put up over 600 yards passing and set SEC records on down 1. So, yeah, LSU's not defending anything, but all due credit, Mississippi State was all too happy to swipe it.
This is the Paul Finebaum Show, supplemented by Aflac.
And we welcome you back. Final hour has arrived, and we are really looking forward to our next guest. He is Scott Rabelais, one of the more reasonable sports columnists out there. Of course, he works down at the Advocate in Baton Rouge, where until Saturday, everything had been going well. Scott, great to have you back on the program, and tell us what in the world is going on down there in Baton Rouge, and how are the folks handling the debacle on Saturday? Good afternoon.
Hey, Paul, good afternoon. Not handling it too well, as you can imagine. You kind of gotten a little used to winning around here. Yeah, it was LSU's first loss since that 7 overtime game against Texas A&M at the end of the 2018 season. So 16 straight wins. And LSU, they had a little trouble with State in years past when Dak Prescott was there and stuff like that. But mostly LSU's owned that series. So it was a lot of embarrassment. I mean, there's some extenuating circumstances you could say, or excuses, but LSU gave up an SEC record number of passing yards to State on Saturday, and didn't look very good doing it. Now, you kind of wonder if there any kind of championship hopes they might have had, slim though they might have been going to the season, are done before the season almost gets started.
The Stingley loss the night before, I'm sure, played a role. But I mean, even, and I know you can't say, well, other than that, what do you think? But I mean, just how would you assess the talent on this team based on what we thought it would be?
I think there's some definitely some talent on the team. There's also Glenn Logan too. He's out. He's supposed to be out this week too. So don't know what's going on there. One of their starting defensive tackles, maybe some kind of disciplinary kind of situation because he was on the sideline Saturday. I think Stingley. I do think Stingley might have made the difference. I mean, in the game. I mean, certainly would have shut down a good part of the field for LSU. I know that seems strange to say, but they did force some turnovers. There's some talent on this team on defense. Ali Gay, a defensive end, looked really good. It's kind of defensive end you want in the 4-3. Jabril Cox, the transfer from North Dakota State, had the pick 6 for LSU's first touchdown. Jacoby Stevens kind of looked like Tyrann Matthews, wearing number 7. Had a couple of recovered a couple of turnovers, and then but he was the only player who started against Clemson in the championship game in January who started on Saturday. So I think some inexperience. They had to start some real young guys and some lack of chemistry maybe. And obviously a team that played well and KJ Costello delivered some passes on the money. But just boy, it was. I think people were disappointed too to see LSU didn't seem to make any adjustments during the game. They went with press man coverage and they stayed with it instead of going to zone or doing some other things. And I think that was disappointing in a reverse Les Miles kind of way, with a new defense in Bo Pelini.
Which brings me to my next question, and I think I know the answer. LSU fans like to play the blame game. Would Pelini be at the top of the list?
Yeah, unfortunately, and these are the same fans who were happy for him to come back. When Dave Aranda left to go be the head coach at Baylor. Yeah, sure, and this is his defense. They installed they went from a 3-4 kind of multiple look to more of a base 4-3, more pressure, more blitzing. This is the defense, and this is the defense Orgeron wants. And this is a guy who he's more in sync with. I wrote about today in my column in a paper. Aranda was more cerebral and quiet and not a yeller. And Ed, as we all know, what kind of personality Ed has. And Bo Pelini is very much in the same vein. So he's got the kind of guy he wants, the kind of defense he wants. Ed's a defensive line coach by trade. And, this is on both of these guys to get it fixed. Now, obviously going to Vandy, is going to be probably not quite as stiff a offensive challenge. And if they can get Stingley back, we can't go to practice, but they were hoping to have him back at practice today. Those things will help, but they've got to get it fixed because the LSU plays Kyle Trask in Florida. They play Ole Miss, who put up some good offensive numbers against Florida. The Alabama. I mean, there's some big challenges ahead for LSU's defense.
Yeah, let's talk about that, Scott, because coming into the season, realistically, you thought LSU had a chance to make a run, maybe not run the table, but with Alabama at home, you look at Florida as a tough game, obviously Auburn, A&M. I mean, you can go up and down the list, but now that you calculate it, after Vanderbilt, Missouri's at home, and then October 17th at Florida, then South Carolina, and then at Auburn and Alabama at home. I mean, that's once you get back on the road at Florida, that is a brutal 4-game stretch.
Yeah, this is one of the games you figured that they probably should win, and the season would be decided by those 4 games at Florida, at Auburn, at A&M late this year, and Alabama at home. And if you could win 3 out of those 4 somehow, you'd say, well, this is a team that could be in contention again for a New Year's Six Bowl or maybe even a college football playoff. Now you've lost one of those games that you were a double-digit favorite in at home, and it's going to make it very tough. I mean, you got to just about run the table the rest of the way, you would think, against that very tough schedule. I do think LSU will improve as the year goes by. Again, they lost a lot of starters, a lot of new players. They've recruited well. There is talent there, but they've got to find some more chemistry. New quarterback, new people on running things on offense and defense. A lot of new defensive starters. And so many guys you miss. You look at any NFL game and you see an LSU former player who was on this team last year. It seems that they're doing something great. Clyde Edwards-Helaire was, catching passes and running the ball great last night for the Kansas City Chiefs once again. So there's a lot of guys they're missing for sure, but there's hope. There's no reason to think that LSU is going to just go like 3-7 or something like that. But suddenly, though, the Vanderbilt game becomes a game you really got to win, or the season really can go off the rails.
Let's talk finally about Miles Brennan. No one really knew what to expect. Fans thought he would be great. Your assessment after 1 week, and where does LSU go if this doesn't work out?
Yeah, I give him a passing grade, Paul. I mean, he wasn't Heisman worthy. Obviously he's going to suffer by comparison to Joe Burrow last year, but he had a better debut than Joe Burrow did 2 years ago against the Miami Hurricanes. Now, Joe had come in very late, and Miles has been in this program for 4 years. But he threw for 347 yards, threw 2 interceptions, but one time his arm got hit. The other was the last play of the game. Held on to the ball too long at times. Didn't kind of trust his arm strength. But they didn't block well for him. LSU gave up 7 sacks, and the drops that affected LSU when Burrow was the first-year quarterback in 2018 seemed to come back to haunt in this game. That at least 4 drops that I counted. They didn't do him any favors, up front or in the receiving corps at times. I don't think people need to panic. But I mean, yeah, there's no real good options other than Miles Brennan. You got 2 true freshmen, T.J. Finley and Max Johnson, behind him, and that's just not a way to go in the SEC, obviously. So hopefully, for LSU's sake, Brennan will grow in this position as Burrow did towards the end of the 2018 season. And for LSU's sake, you think you got 2 games against Vandy and Missouri now that the SEC schedule makers gave them a chance to kind of regroup before you go to Florida and try to pull off what would be a big upset at this point there.
Scott, before you go, Ed Orgeron has been the man. He's been the centerpiece of college football. A book coming out on him, 60 Minutes. How has he handled one of the toughest losses of his career at LSU?
He's followed the script that a lot of coaches follow. The praise is on the players when we win. The blame is on me when we lose. That's Orgeron's words, and not mine. And look, he should take some of the blame. They could have been better prepared. Certainly defensively, they could have made more adjustments, and he's got to be involved in that as a coach with a defensive background. You're only as good as your last game, Paul. Your last game was Clemson, so everything was great, and now your last game is a loss to Mississippi State. So, I think he's still got the backing of a lot of fans. Like he's a Louisiana guy. He's like one of them. He's got a kind of a blue collar mentality. But they'll turn on you pretty quick here, like anywhere, if you don't win a national championship or no. So I think right now the people are a little disgruntled, but he can get them back on his side very quickly if they can reel off some wins.
Well, glad to hear things are back to normal again in Baton Rouge, Scott.
Oh yes. Now, 15-0, that's hard for people to deal with right here, Paul. Some adversity, some negativity. This is kind of what we're used to in Louisiana. We can deal with that.
Yeah, that's the LSU I love. Hey, thanks for coming on, Scott. Always great to be with you, and you be well. We'll see you soon.
Thank you, Paul. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Scott. Scott Rapley in Baton Rouge. We'll get back to your phone calls rest of the way as we continue here on a Tuesday afternoon. Is calling next. Good afternoon, Taylor.
Hi, Paul. Love the show, man. Thank you for taking my call. 2 quick points.
Thank you.
Mississippi State showed some really good team speed, did they not? I mean, I know LSU's got a lot of young players this year, but those guys seem to have good team speed in that game. But my main point is, everybody's going nuts over Clemson again, right? And I just wonder what your thoughts are about, if Clemson was in the SEC, could Dabo Swinney, in addition to the rest of his coaching staff, really be up to the task to prepare 14 against 14 every single week, play a pounding physical schedule, and keep up with the rest of the teams in that league? Because in the ACC, they're preparing 14 guys against maybe 7 or 8, and not knocking the ACC, but there's no comparison. I mean, so what are your thoughts about that?
Taylor, I would say, I mean, if you go back over 5 or 6 years, I think they would still have a national championship. They may not have 2. I know they played for 4 or 5, because ultimately it will get you. But when you think about some of the Clemson teams going back to starting in 2015, I'm trying to remember which one was Deshaun, 15, 16, and then 16 was Deshaun Watson. I don't think. I mean, they would have lost a game or 2, but I still think they would have been in the playoff most of the time.
Oh, no doubt, no doubt. And Sweeney's capable, no doubt. But I know, Yeah,
and I know there's a typical SEC slant but there's no doubt they have an easier schedule. But I think Clemson is at the same level as the SEC right now. I mean maybe in some ways better than the SEC.
Yeah, I see your point. Yeah, I just wanted to get your thoughts on that. And a quick shout out to the horse soldiers at Fort Campbell, huh? Roll Tide. Thank you, Paul.
Well done. Thank you. The issue with Clemson, though, and the ACC is that you never get in the SEC. You really don't get a weekend off. Yeah, I mean you may have 2 or 3 SEC games that you can skate, but that would have gotten Clemson a couple of times, but I don't think it would have gotten them many times. The team that won the national championship 2 years ago, I don't think that team would have been stopped. Last year's team, maybe. Hey, thank you for the call. Really do appreciate it. Mitch in South Carolina. Hey, Mitch.
How are you doing today, Mr. Paul?
We are doing fine. Thank you.
The LSU game, to me, was not as surprising as the Texas A&M performance. Texas A&M was hyped up to be a top 10, maybe even a contender.
Well, they were. I mean, they were a top 10 team, and I agree with you. I think that is the team that had better show up this weekend, or there is going to be a lot of selling that stock.
Let me ask you this, and I don't mean it in any way but just the way it sounds, but what has Jimbo Fisher really done except for what he won a championship at Florida State and then ran the program into ground?
Well, he had 2 really good years there. In 2013, he ran the table with Jameis Winston, and then the next year they went undefeated regular season and then lost in the semis against Oregon. Other than that, not very much. But other than that is saying that those were 2 fantastic years, and he did resurrect that program after Bobby Bowden. Bowden's career there ended poorly, as we all know, and I believed that Jimbo was going to get it done at Texas A&M. I'm not jumping off that bandwagon yet.
Well, he's stuck behind Colin, his quarterback. Late last week,
but I will tell you this, Mitch. Anytime I do a national show at ESPN, he's the one that people want to talk about, because there is a feeling among many in the national media that he is not going to live up to the $70 million contract, and the pressure will start building if he has another average year. And right now, can't imagine him contending for the title.
No, whenever you only beat Vanderbilt by 5 points.
No.
But anyway, thank you for talking to me, and you have a wonderful night.
You too. Always great to hear from you. Appreciate it. Let's check in with Kagan, who is in Arkansas. Hey, Kagan.
Hey, how's it going, Paul?
We are doing great.
I just wanted to ask you what you thought about the Arkansas and Georgia game this past weekend. Do you think they've gotten any better?
That is very hard to say, Kagan. I think ultimately they will get better. First half, combination of a lot of things, mostly Georgia. But I would like to see them in a more even matchup. Not one of the better teams in the country.
I agree.
Yeah, this weekend will be this weekend will be interesting for them. They're playing a really what we think is a really good team, but they're playing a team coming off of a humongous win. So I think if they're going to take a step forward, it could be Saturday.
Well, I sure hope so, Paul. It's nice talking to you. And go Hogs!
Thank you very much. Really appreciate it. Bart is in Georgia, and you are next up. Hey, Bart.
Hey there, Paul. How you doing?
We're doing great. Thank you.
Paul, it's a big week here in Athens. We got the Tigers this week. My daddy, he's a big Auburn fan. I'm a big Georgia fan, live in Athens. What do you think about the quarterback situation and how it's going to be like here in Athens, especially taking on a team like Auburn this weekend?
Hey, by the way, I know about the incestuous relationship between Auburn and Georgia, but that's pretty weird. How did you end up going to Georgia, if I could ask you that question?
Yeah, I grew up in Georgia, and the Zell Miller Scholarship. It's not hard to take that when you don't have to pay much.
No,
for
that's cool. No, I agree. That's a great thing Georgia has. I don't. Has Kirby announced a starter yet, or is he going to play games like every other coach? Because I doubt he'll start JT, but man, I would get him in the game pretty quickly, wouldn't you?
Yeah, I mean, I know he's been cleared. I think Stetson did a great job this past week, coming in and taking over the reins and finishing up that game.
I think it would be unfair
Arkansas.
not to start him. I don't think it matters. I'm not really that. This is not high school where you get maybe an extra button on your letter jacket by starting. I think the game plan is more important than who starts, and not that you want to waste a series, but I think I don't know what they're going to do, but one thing I know they have to do, that offensive line had better block better.
Oh, yeah. I mean, you're 100% right about that, Paul. Well, Paul, thank you for taking my call, and go Dogs.
Thank you. And I think that may have been part of the problem. The line was just out of sorts. And by the way, that could be Sam Pittman there. I mean, he knows a little bit about the offensive line at Georgia. Hey, thanks for the call. Caleb is up next. Good afternoon, Caleb.
Hello, Paul. How are you?
We are doing great. Thank you.
Hey, Paul. I'm a really big fan of yours. I've been watching you for 6 years. I'm a huge Tennessee fan. And what do you think about the Georgia and Auburn game this weekend?
Yeah, I'm still kind of working my way through that. I talked to a friend of mine, a good friend of mine who's a coach, and I said, do you think Georgia is going to bounce back? And he said yes, and he gave me a number of reasons, and he pointed toward the offensive line shoring up, and that will solve some of the issues. I still think it's. I still favor Georgia a little bit, but I'm concerned about who the quarterback is going to be. Like I was talking to the previous caller, and without knowing that, and without knowing the game plan, this is a very prickly game to call.
Okay, I'm very thrilled to be talking to you. Have a good day.
Caleb, thanks for calling, and you be well. Really appreciate it. Let's take a break. Georgia Auburn. When I covered Auburn and Alabama back in Alabama as a newspaper reporter, that was one of my 2 or 3 favorite games of all time. It was such and the fact that it was in mid-November. I'm gonna have to take some getting used to it on the first weekend of October. And look at some of the names here. Kyle Pitts from Ole Miss. He had an amazing game. I'm doing this wrong. Kyle Pitts from Florida, of course, who was the talk of the country as one of the better tight ends we've seen in a while. His catches for touchdown ties a number of players, including Ike Hilliard and Jack Jackson. Kyle, I tried to move you to another team, and your team will not have that. What a game for Kyle Pitts. That's what happens when you read as you're doing 4 different things. I got outed. Let's check in with I-Man, who has done that as well. Good afternoon, I-Man.
Hey, good afternoon, Paul. Thanks. The game got a steep road to hoe, and Auburn Tigers pulled it out. In all fairness, I thought that was a Kentucky touchdown. Didn't you?
I did.
I mean,
but they don't give me a vote.
In real time. Yeah, in real time, I thought it was a touchdown. But anyhow, they won. I kind of like the Auburn Tigers with Georgia. No particular reason other than it's about time Auburn can turn the tide on the Bulldogs. Paul, I was listening to an interesting conversation last week. Now, Birmingham has all the major networks, ABC, NBC, all that, right? They've got Sports Illustrated people, ESPN people. Hell, Birmingham's even got its own first 48 hours crew. Isn't that correct? They got all the news, events, and sports and all that covered. AL.com even.
Okay. Didn't.
All right.
You bet.
Now,
Didn't know that.
If there was a wizard, if there was a kid in Tuscaloosa that was 8 under on the golf course, don't you think somebody would have been over there? ABC Wild World Sports would have been over there. They'd have probably give that kid a Timex. You know, even in the water, takes a beating and keeps on ticking. But you know, I was talking with Squirrel after the conversation that Jim had. Of course, he's playing against an older kid, and Jim said he had a meltdown, but he was 8 under. And you know, Squirrel and I.
No. Hold on. I'm in. You have to understand. It was a match play. Match play. It's about holes, not total score. Jim was 8 up with 9 holes to go in a golf match, whatever age he was, and he lost.
And he lost. And Squirrel brought up a great point. And he said he was playing against an older kid. Now, who was that older kid? That older kid must have got deep in his head. Was it Gary Player? It couldn't have been Greg the Shark Norman. I mean, he's too young to be older than Jim. I mean, who was that kid? And why don't we? I bet we've seen him on TV. Because that kid rattled Jim from Tuscaloosa to no end. Just kind of like Jeff Skull did yesterday. It rattled him. It shook the shingles off his roof, Paul. I mean, Mama can't fix them shingles as fast as they was falling. They was all in the damn yard, nails and all. I mean, and the rain come in, started leaking like hell. Now, who was that kid that got so deep in Jim's head? It had to be Greg Norman to play that well against an athlete.
No,
I
don't think it was Greg Norman, because Greg Norman would have done the same thing. Greg Norman's considered the greatest choker in major golf history.
No. We've got a new one. He admitted it himself. But, you know, it had to be somebody like Gary Player or somebody like that, somebody a lot older.
Well, Gary Player's 80. Hold on. Gary Player's like 80 years old. Jack Nicklaus is 80 years old.
Well, it could have been Jack Nicklaus when he was up and coming. But because it was an older kid than Jim, and Jim's 75 and a half years old. So, I mean, I guess if you're 12, somebody 5 years older is an older kid. But whoever it was got deep in that head. But remember this. Now, he did say this. In all the sports he played in, he was talking about all of them. Then he had to catch himself. He said his opponents respected him. And you know what? There's not even a damn crayon drawing of a stick person of Jim swinging a baseball bat, throwing a bowling ball, playing tennis, swimming a river, or nothing. But anyhow, you know, it's just some things make you go, Imagine that. War Damn Eagle.
Thank you, man. Wow, that's a lot to unpack there. And we're psychoanalyzing golf matches in our youth. Let's get back to the calls at 855-242-7285. And Stephen is up next. Hey, Stephen, you're on the air.
Hey, Paul, what's up, buddy? Hey
there.
So before I get into my Fire Jimbo rant, I have to get a hold of Iron Man, dude. Jim is in Iron Man's head. Jim owns Iron Man. I mean, can Iron Man not call and talk about Jim? I mean, I don't understand what them two have going on, but Jim's definitely in his head. So Jim, keep going, buddy. All right. Before I get into the Jimbo rant, I just want to say my wife Mary calls, and she said Nick Saban's still a cheater and that Georgia's rolling the state of Alabama this year. Now let me get into Jimbo. Jimbo sucks. He needs to go. I don't care how much money it takes. Hey, Jimbo, the 1980s have called, and they want their damn offense back. Dude, oh, my gosh. They suck, Paul. I mean, what are we getting for our money? I mean, if this is the biggest Ponzi scheme ever created, then A&M is bought and sold into the pyramid Jimbo scheme. Let me tell you, I've already gotten banned from a rivals board. So I'm telling you right now that Jimbo is a fraud.
Hey, Stephen, I'm curious, how do you get banned from a
he's a fraud.
Stephen, how do you get banned from a message board? How do you get banned from a message board?
Speaking the truth, and the moderators don't want to hear.
Okay.
I mean.
Well, anyway, I would appeal. Jim is up next. Hey, Jim.
You know what? This guy I was calling to get on with that fool. I'm gonna try to stay calm. How much real estate do you think I own in that fool, trash, piece of crap, piece of S, iMonkey? How much real estate do you think I own in it? Huh?
Well, I've said this before. Anytime one caller calls up every day and talks about the same person, I think the answer is self-evident.
Well, let me ask you, I'm serious, Paul. What do you think is wrong with that fool? I mean, other than being an idiotic fool obsessed with me because I'm the best he's ever seen, and he's jealous of me on this show for the last 10 or 12 years, and I've ruled on the show, and you know that's true. Why is that son of a Esco, you know what, why is he so obsessed with me? Well, let me tell you why, if you don't know.
Okay, yeah, I was going to ask you, why is he so obsessed with you?
Go ahead, I'll let you, I hope you give an honest, objective report. What do you think it is?
I don't know, Jim. So in the spirit of time, why don't you give us the answer?
Well, first of all, he lies about my age. I'm not 80, 70, or 60. I'm not even as old as he is. Listen, here's the thing. He lies about my age, trying to make me look bad, trying to make me look like some old geezer, which is exactly what he is. It's like the dim, Paul. They said, you know, the latest thing, by the way, that's going to happen at 9 o'clock tonight. I hope you tuned in. There's going to be another crushing going on tonight with an imbecile against a brilliant man. And I think you can discern which one.
Back to I-Man.
You messed up the call. Let me finish my point here. So that fool is so jealous of me, and he can't stay up with me. You know, he's never, ever done anything but call the show like that other fool, Squirrel, that idiot lying fool, Ronnie Crowley, who's an idiot. He's a total idiot. He calls the show because he's obsessed with me because he knows I'm the mainstay on the show. He knows I'm the guy that's got the icon beside his name. He knows all that. You know that, Paul. I mean, I'm not great now, but I'm better than them. And when I was great, they couldn't touch me, as you used to say. They couldn't lay a glove on me. Even Shoe Cluck Milo knows that's a fact. He used to try to jump my case. You remember that?
Yeah, I don't think he's a serious threat anymore.
He's not even a serious shoe clerk anymore. Women's shoes at Saks. I remember all these things. But listen, Paul, here's the thing. I am a great athlete. I hate to say it, but it's true. I am a great athlete. I-Man's not even a great monkey. He's not even a great any kind of player of music. He's just an imbecile trying to make a name for himself, riding off the best guy on the show, which I was and might still be if I want to be. Now, here's the thing, though, Paul. He lied about what he said. Let me straighten that out because I want the people to know what a liar that scumbag was. I was 11 and a half years old. I could play real good golf. I was beating 15-year-olds when I was 11. All right, I played a kid. I had him. You know, I must have been playing pretty good to get the other good player in the finals of the championship. I had him 8 down with 9 to play. You're right. All I had to do was win 1 hole. Okay, I got overconfident. I mean, I was obsessed with seeing myself get that trophy. I wasn't but 11, Paul. I had not matured, you know, to the point where I am now.
Jim, I don't mean to be a critic here, but I've covered a lot of golf. All you do is win 1 hole.
I'm telling you, Paul, it was the collapse of the century, and I tell you what it did. It drove me into my bedroom for 3 days. I couldn't come out. I was so embarrassed, ashamed, and I was stunned. I actually was stunned. I mean, I was beside myself with being stunned. I couldn't believe it.
I've always thought that greatness is coming.
I'll tell you how it happened. If you listen, will you listen? Huh?
Of course. I mean, this is intriguing.
Okay. Here's how he brought his damn family out there. His sister was out there hollering on my shot. His daddy was riding over my ball. And when I hit my ball down the fairway, he would take his golf club with his whole family piled on the golf club and run over my ball.
And they rode over that. Well, why didn't you tell the marshal or somebody?
Because there wasn't no damn. This wasn't the U.S. Open, Paul. I was 11 years old. There was about 10, 12 people out there on the course. I mean, you crazy? What do you think this was? Anyway, that's how
Jim, here's what you have to. I mean, you know, golf is a gentleman. You should have just said, I'm declaring myself the winner. You guys are cheating.
Well, Paul was 11. I was scared of the old man. He's a millionaire. The guy's daddy was a millionaire. I mean, they all knew my daddy and my mother. I didn't know what to do. I knew I was getting run over, and it was the most abusive thing I've ever
we have to go to a
life.
break. We have to go to a break. But I'm telling you what. If you're up for it, I think if this guy's still alive, I think this match should be replayed.
He and I talked the other day. Still alive? He's not but 60 years old now. I'll be the official. I'll put on a USGA blue blazer and put a little USGA red thing, and I will officiate. This has to be settled. This cannot be. Hey, Jim, we have to go to a break. We're about to run out of time. He's a little older than me, Paul. I'm telling you, he's a little older than me. But I mean, I talked about it the other day. We talked about it the other day.
This sounds like a movie. This has gone on too long.
I tell you,
we will be.
That's been part of my life.
Has to be settled. We can't let this one. I can't sleep tonight until I get this resolved. And we welcome you back, and it is great to have you. And Justin Ferguson put out this tweet: Auburn head coach Gus Malzahn called Georgia probably the most talented team overall in the SEC. I wonder if he says the same thing when they play LSU and Alabama. Seth Emerson saying Kirby Smart's response: you ask every coach and they'll say the same. They'll say the team they play that week has the most talent, and the next week that team will have the most talent, and the next week that's called coach speak. So for Gus, he has the most talent in the SEC. You have to give Kirby credit. I think my favorite line of the day, and we played it earlier, was Jeremy Pruitt with a straight face saying Missouri won the second half against Alabama. Cat Daddy, you are next up. Your team won the second half, didn't they? Or close to it. They won the fourth quarter.
After that game, I think pull me something strong, make it a hurricane so this Gamecock does not go insane. But I got some news for Jim from Tuscaloosa. Jim, call the local police department and have them loosen up that ankle bracelet around your leg. I think it's driving you nuts.
Yeah, I don't know how old Jim is, but let's say he's 60 or 70 or 50. We're still talking about something that happened when he was 11 years old. And I know that all of us have traumatic experiences, but sometimes you just have to move on.
Yeah, I bet his blood pressure would show up on the Richter scale.
But, I mean, the idea, Cat Daddy, I mean, if the kid's father, who was a millionaire, he said, stepped on his ball, I think someone needs to investigate. Hey, unfortunately we have to go. Thanks, Cat Daddy. Appreciate you being the last caller. It has been quite a program. We thank you for your patience, really, when we bumped into some problems early on, but we finished strong.